Right, okay, so welcome everyone to another exciting episode of FMBug. We've got quite a full agenda tonight, which I hope you'll all find interesting. So just, I'm sure we've had a quick look at the agenda, but briefly, the main talks are John's going to do a demo of his OData session. Doug Wallis is going to join us later and talk about FMServer on Ubuntu and some new features coming in the next FileMaker version. And at the end, we're going to have Steve Winter is going to talk about FileMaker on Linux and deployment. So I don't think I need to waffle on too much. We probably will go on till 9:15 before opening the virtual bar tonight, unless Steve's really quick, which I don't think he will be, because there's just so much in there tonight. So I hope that's okay for everybody. And without further ado, or wasting any more time, I'm going to hand over to Gary to take us through what's new in FileMaker news this week.
Give me 2 seconds, present my screen. Hopefully you can all see this. It's all going to come in now.
Yeah, it's coming in.
Cool. All right. So, only a couple of things I've picked up over the time, just to see what's going on. So we started this section last session, and it was seemingly well received. A few people thought it was good. I don't know whether I've picked up key news things that you'll all be interested in, but I'll give it a go. So we've got, as the first port of call, Claris Engage 2021. Now, Claris announced that they were going to make it virtual, which I thought was good. Last year was very good. We spoke about this, I think, in a couple of sessions back about how good it was. I felt the sessions were. I thought it was pretty good. But then about a month ago, they announced this, which they said, instead of doing things like this, we're going to do things like this instead. Which basically means we've got Claris Engage running over a space of about 6 months to 7 months. They're going to do sessions. So I think they've turned into Apple, but they're probably not going to do an announcement every month or every quarter. So some of the things I wouldn't mind discussing. All the stuff I mentioned in the news, I'm not having a discussion now about. It's basically something we'll be discussing in the virtual bar at the end. We'll go over these things, but these are the few headline things that I've picked up in the news in the last couple of months. But I don't know how you feel about this, but this is how I feel about it. I think it's rubbish. I think it's a bad idea to run it over many periods of months, because the whole thing I like about Engage is the fact that I had 3 days, 2 or 3 days, where the entire world community got together. There was really good point of discussions. There was really big rooms set up within Slack to do chats with loads of people. I thought it worked really well, so I wouldn't mind your thoughts on what you feel about that. I personally don't like the idea of it, but we'll see how we go. But that's the way they're going to do it. So they said May was the first event. I don't know if anyone's got any dates of when the first event is going to be. No. So they've put a slide out. We're now, what, the 10th of May. So they've got 20 days to film, edit, produce, and distribute. Now, Jewel and I tell you, this takes sometimes weeks just to get this online. I'd like to see how they do a worldwide community, but that would be fun. So we'll see. The other thing is there was a post that went up from Wim, from Sir Lion, about the issues that people have found if you're using OAuth within Go. There was instances where it didn't bring up the actual account name and password if you had OAuth turned on. All I'd urge you is the saying I spotted: if you use OAuth, I know this is going to trouble you if you've got iPads and iOS deployments out there. It's a really good article. And the other reason why I wanted to mention it is someone has obviously lent on the keyboard for the URL, because it's see how FileMaker spelled a bit weird, but good luck trying to find it. If you type FileMaker login dialog box, you won't find it. So you need to put a few extra E's in. But it's that said, it's a really good article. As always with Wim, it was thorough, and he's mentioning around various aspects how to get around that and what to do. There's like they've adopted the long press in iOS to be like a right click within that to then get the box to come up so you can sign in. So I thought that was something, certainly if you're using OAuth, you're going to get stuck. So another feed that I found was Design Think Your Code, another really good article by Darren, and it basically goes through how to build your code in a structured way, the do's and don'ts, the best approaches. It's a really short read, as he says, 8 minutes there. It's slightly quicker than that, but I thought it was interesting. It gives another angle and a standpoint of how you should be writing your code. I reckon you've all probably had the instances where you've picked someone else's solutions up and gone, oh my God, what the hell is this? But it's that thing. I know Penny and I are trying to do this sort of thing going forward. It's a big uphill struggle when you've got big designs, but if you're doing something new, then you just design it correctly. But I thought it was a really good article, certainly worth a read. I had a read of it, and a couple of points in there certainly enlightened me. And then this is a personal one, because I saw this pop up, and it got posted, you can see, 24th of April. So it wasn't that long ago, and it was a company that has decided to build a POS system in FileMaker. So I don't procrastinate a lot, and I don't blow my own trumpet, but this is something that Penny and I did a while ago, and this company's really pushing it. But it's worth looking at. They've got a good idea and a good design. But I wanted to show you this. We built a POS system that had to deal with this. So some of you would have seen this video. So Penny and I built this, and this is the level of our POS system that had to manage. So there's a reasonable amount of people came in and bought products. And you can see at the end of this what happened with the POS system. So we built a 14 tills across 2 sites, 16 staff, 16,000 units sold on both events, and 2 developers built it in 3 days. So I don't know, maybe I should have done a video on that as well. So, but there you go. But that's the end of the news. They're the key points that I found on that. So one thing I wanted to say, thanks to Penny for writing that, because she wrote most of it, not me. So, yeah, so discussion at the bar, really. More to the point is the engage definitely dialog box. Thoughts on coding, I always like that. For me, it's always get all of your ideas and your thoughts of how to code better. You've all inherited dodgy systems, I'm sure, more than we have. I've probably inherited from me, and I built them that way, but there you go. And then anything else you want to discuss in the virtual bar. So yeah, they're the few news short snippets that I found.
Great, Gary. Thanks. Yeah, I'm not keen on the need Claris Engage either. I've got you popping up next again.
Is it me again? You want me to go again? Am I running
with your?
back to back?
It's both of us. I know it's both of us. Okay, no, it's question and answer session. So this was designed really because when I set this meeting up ages ago, I wanted it to be open to not just developers, which is, I mean, it's great that developers are here, but I also wanted to give newbies or people at any stage of development an opportunity to bring a question or something they were proud of to the meeting and get some expert advice if they needed it, or anyone to ask any question they like of the rest of the members in the group. So this is that session. Just before we go into that, I had apologies from one of my core members who's been around for a long time with us, complete amateur. He dabbles in his retirement in FileMaker and just loves it. And so this is, you know, I always have him half in mind when I do things like this, but unfortunately he can't be with us tonight because of a death in the family. So he's going to join us next time again, but feel free, someone drag up some questions. If we run out of time, we'll put them in the virtual bar at the end. Robert, I knew you were going to ask a question.
Maybe one thing, I guess it overlaps with the intent of this space for new people to the platform to ask questions and see that they get to love the product as much as we love it. I'm curious to know if there's a lot of people signing up for diversity table as I forget the different designations they have for tablers and people helping out. I didn't sign up to provide help as possible for them, and I don't know, like I'm sure it takes time for them to gather a group and pair people and everything, but I'm just curious if it's an initiative that people here have heard about, and that it's getting some traction amongst the community.
So I have a question. Hi, everybody. So
Hi.
customer called up today, said, do you have anyone running FileMaker 18 on, what's the one before Big Sur?
Catalina.
Catalina. And so I said, no, but I got someone on 19 and M1 chips and Big Sur. But long story short, he was saying he had some testing because haven't rolled, but he was like, hey, this is a little bit slower to load. So I just asked the internet, and a couple articles there basically said throw out the cache. The one other thing that I saw that was interesting was some people were asserting that the slowdown was related to going through the launch control. Let me see if I get the right name for this thing. We go open launch center. So I told them to try and go straight in with an FMP protocol, perhaps wrapped in a launcher. And with apologies, someone had a good answer who I cut you off in a second ago. But those are the two things that I suggested he try. And I'm open to other suggestions from you wise international people.
I'll definitely take that one. That's fine. Definitely 18 running under Catalina is fine. We're running it pretty much solidly across our whole estate. We haven't moved up to 19 yet. Absolutely, it's definitely the cache. Put money on it. So it'll be under library caches, and then you'll see a folder. It's definitely that, and if you can turn that off, there is a setting, I think it's in 19, they've now done a config setting, so you can turn that off and stop it from actually building the cache. But I created a little Apple script, which then just every time you booted FileMaker, it then cleared the cache out on login, and it totally changes the way it boots up. Because what it will do is if you open a large system, it will create a cache of the last instance of that file. And then when it boots up to try and save you bandwidth of bringing records in, it compares that cache on boot to the server. So if it's a large file, it's got to do an awful lot of work comparing that cache. So you get a massive slowdown in the boot time. And you'll open the file and you just won't even get the username and password box come up. Some of our big solutions can take up to 3-4 minutes just to open. So delete the cache, open instantly.
Yeah,
so that would definitely be the price. I'd definitely go that way to have a look at it.
That sounds spot on. And I'm looking, I've got 4 buttons here. One of them opens application support, one opens cache, one opens diagnostic reports, one opens preferences. But anyway, I like that idea of just whack it. Sounds good to me. I'll give it a go.
Just make sure. Go. I
was going to say that's going to be all the more important now that you've got so many people connecting these days over a VPN or generally pretty poor internet connections. Whereas when they've been sitting in the office before, the effect might not have been that great.
Hey, Gary, do you, just to isolate out the other suggestion that was up on the thread on community, do you, when your people go onto the system, do they go through some sort of launcher file?
We got a couple that do a launcher file. Some just go file host. It doesn't make a blind bit of difference which way you go, to be honest. In our test, it made no difference to the file opening. What you'll get, what you won't see, if you're going for a launcher file, the launcher file usually opens straight away. And then if your launcher file is adopting your password to the child file, which normally is the process of having a launcher file, if it hasn't got a login challenge and it's just going through because their launcher's got the password in, you'll just get a delay at the next stage because it will read the cache when it opens that file there. So it doesn't make any difference that we've
So your money's on cache, and we'll certainly give that a go, just isolating out the other thing. And we do, just for while we're on the topic, I do the launchers, they wrap in FMP protocol because it minimizes the number of 661 errors clogging up my email. But anyway, I'll try cache. So thank you.
No worries. Cool. Right. I will present my screen again. Hi, John. This is something I wanted to bring up. I spoke to a smaller group about this, and it's a subject that I wanted to talk about. Fat, thin, wide, or tall. Now, there's been some various talks about this over, 5-10 years, about wide tables, thin tables, many tables, small tables, small files, multiple files, one massive file, take your pick. Now, I've done testing with this for years, trying to find the best solution for what we do. And I wanted to give a scenario of the challenge I've got, and I wouldn't mind the viewpoint from all of the group about what the best practice will be. And I'm happy to go away and take these ideas and test stuff a bit more, but I've done a reasonable amount of testing in this already. So, but the question is, this is the scenario. We have 500,000 products, actual products, and they are sold across our estate of retail outlets throughout the day. So we're getting all these transactional elements of items being sold, and we bring all of that in to our module and our system to then, so each buyer can look at the types of products that they're buying and get a trend of what's being sold by day, by week, by 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 26 weeks. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, I've just been asked for 52 weeks, okay, to be held within FileMaker. Now that's fine. Those of you that know me, I've taken a lot of time to do BI and analytics, and we use much bigger tools to do this job. But this request said, can we have it natively in FileMaker? And the answer is always yes, because we very rarely say no. So we've got all the fields need to be searchable as well. So to give you an idea of where this is, oh yeah, the final thing, record changes. We average 9 to 240,000 records will be changed per night. Now that depends, that 240, if you get up to 12 and 26 weeks, that's why that number goes up. So it's about 9,000 per day are getting changed across the locations and against certain products. So once you get through this, the question is, do you go for wide versus narrow, many files, many tables, many fields? Now, we tried about 5-6 years ago creating one massive wide table for this data, because the bit that's the problem is the searchable. So if every field for every type of records that are held needs to be searchable. So someone should be able to search for greater than 10 units sold in 26 weeks and less than 5 units sold in 1 day, and then get FileMaker to work that out and come back with the products that then meet that requirement. So this is a fun slide because it caused a laugh when I created it before and showed it briefly. I decided to get the system to pick out what fields were, and it decided to come up with a tractoring sign. So sorry for the tractor, but that's what the fields mean, but I'll explain. So we have 18 million records sitting in a core table that updates nightly. That populates one database at the moment. This is our current structure. That current database has 6 tables within that database. And there are 13 fields in each table and 500,000 records in each table as well. Now that gives you, each of the tables is the 1 day, 1 week, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 26 weeks. So there's your tables. The reason why we populate all of the records on every table and keep them in sync is for that searching criteria. So they sit at a master system that sits there, which has got the product record, and now I can bring in the relative related records by the unique control field, which is our reference number. Now, that is in effect where we are. This gives you an idea of the data structure and the amount of links we've got to make that work with the amount of tables that we've got. So there's an awful lot of linking to make that searchable. And my question is, do we change this, and how do we go about moving this forward? So we've looked at it of trying to update the table every night, because every record has to have 500,000 records. You're in effect either doing a truncate of the 500,000 to update all of them, which, you know, anything from 9 to 240,000 would have changed. So only half our records would have totally changed, really, if you've got 500,000, 240,000 changed. And it's the time it takes to do this. The nightly process to update all those tables and move them forward takes on average about an hour and a half to 3 hours every night of processing of major scripts that go through and move all this data around. So that's the idea and the discussion point. To give you an idea of what it's doing, so this is one of the tables. The left-hand side is from one of our FileMaker systems. We can see the 1 week of sales and goods in. So they wanted both. They want sales and goods in of 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, and the stock. So you can see the amount of data that needs updating there by store. Now, it doesn't look a lot of data, but it's the process of how to do it. And then the other side of that is because we've got that data, we can generate the graphs and various bits and pieces within FileMaker natively because we've got that data set. Okay. Now, there was a useful read that Nick put up about that process, which I went over about the performance. And a lot of people did say, yes, if you're getting up to 1 million records, you're best to go with super narrow tables, really lightweight, and your searches will be quicker because it just works. FileMaker works that quick. I agree with that, do agree with that, but I can't update fast enough in that sort of scenario. The other side of it as well is the database ends up, when you get lots of tables, because I've got 500,000 records in every table, I've got duplication of that information across those tables. And one of the things our users are lazy is I started to put only the valid data. So if you've got 1 week of data in there and you've only got 18,000 records that have had 1 week's worth of data, put the 18,000 records in only. Little things, they want to do greater than 0. So if you don't have the data in, you can't search across the relationship when there's no data there to search from. So the option is you'd have to go to the table, grab the IDs, come back, do the match. And then you think, well, that works fine. Well, what if the user wants to do a compound search of greater than in that field, less than in that field, and then greater than in this field? You end up with a very complicated scripting methodology to then come back with the result of the products that they wanted. So that was the idea. That was the point of discussion. I don't mind if we want to have a little Q&A about it now, or we just take it to the bar at the end. And I'm trying to work out the fastest way to do this, and that's why. So, but let me know.
Have a quick session now if people have got some answers for around 5 or 10 minutes or so.
Yeah.
And then rest we can take to the bar.
I welcome anyone's ideas and any questions if that wasn't clear. If there's stuff you want to explain more, I've got a plethora of data I can talk to you about.
So Gary, just to make sure I understand correctly what you said, all of your different tables, they have basically the same set of fields in each of them?
Correct.
Okay. And is there any chance, so I guess one record will move from one table to the next as time goes by, is that it?
It's a cumulative position, so it's a sum of 4 weeks, the sum of 8 weeks from today backwards. So okay. You're right. If we were isolated 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, you systematically can move the records along, if you see what I mean, a day ago. But because it's cumulative, it'll be 1 day, 2 days will be today and yesterday, if you see what I mean.
Okay. And I'm just brainstorming here, but what if you were to do something, I don't know if the word party model is appropriate for this here, but if you were to store all your records into just one table and then to say, okay, it belongs into this stack, the single day, last week, last 5 weeks. For that, you just create like a matching record, but with just the ID or next to nothing, that lets you have a list in that table of those IDs, and you can make a relationship to the original table where the data is stored, but everything data-wise happen is kind of centralized, and you have those kind of table extensions in those other tables that let you map out how things stand in the time scope, and from there do queries that would traverse a relationship, but a single one and all for index data. I'm just curious if that model would
if I'm understanding what you're explaining, I'd need to get a bit more meat on the bone on that one, shall we say, to see whether or not I could work out what it is you're explaining. But I think if it was IDs, my only concern would be is because of the speed the data is changing, it's updating that information. So I'm already taking transactional records and summarizing by day. and then taking that day and summarizing by week.
But, yes, so but basically your record, when it's in multiple tables, it's a mirror copy of itself, right?
It's in multiple tables when it comes down to the product ID, but the data relating to that, yes, you're right. The 4 weeks will contain a proportion of the 1 week. I agree, because the 1 week data is in there. So if you sold something in a week that sold 5 units and you sold 50 in 4 weeks, well, 5 of those 50 in week 4 is in week 1. Agreed. But we don't hold. I've got transactional data, and if I had the 18 million records is the transactional history of 26 weeks worth of data. So this is where I feel that I have the problem with this, is the fact that if I created a transactional relationship and then did it on parameters, possibly, if I'm understanding how you're saying, with like a global or something that then creates a dynamic relationship, that will be against the 18 million record table.
Okay.
Which I think will be, I just think it'd be really, really slow.
I see.
Disastrously slow, because every time that relationship fires, it's got to then siphon through 18 million records to find the matching set first, even as a relationship.
So, well, it could be that what I said that does not apply. I don't know. I feel like I'm having difficulty grasping it. Maybe if when we're at the bar time, you're able to share.
Absolutely,
like,
I can share the screen.
The structure for like
one
or two records in each table, it would make it easier to understand, because right now there are a couple of things that are too abstract for myself, at least.
Yep, and that's the reason why I wanted to leave it for the bar, because then I can share my screen and you can then start asking questions. I can show you the design of that as well and go through it a bit more. But it's purely, at one point we started looking at processing just change data, but then we found out over a period of time you end up out of sync across all the tables, which is even worse. So we found it's better to purge. And the reason for that going out of sync is not because the scripting was wrong. All this data comes from a third party. So all of a sudden you have one day where the third party system didn't poll for one store. So you've missed your opportunity, because then they poll the next day 2 days instead of 1. So, and I've got no trigger to know when that happens easily. So for us, it was, hi, Tony.
So I dropped a link in the chat. There was a DevCon presentation titled Building Dashboards with FileMaker, Luke Rochester. And I remember watching it, and it's about building a data cube. It's got 21,000 views. One of them is me. And I remember watching it and thinking that it was well done. So I think it's worth a look. No guarantees, but it might have some ideas for you.
Luke, yeah, brilliant. Yeah, Luke Rochester inspired me to get into BI about 5-6 years ago. So, and I've done this in Click. Absolutely. I can do this in Click, no problems at all. And it can chunk that sort of data. And you're right, it's about building a data cube in a correct way. But with all the work I've done in Click, I've yet to be able to get FileMaker to then follow that in an easy way. I even created like a SQL instance that did that, and you do the SQL calls from FileMaker on that data cube. Yes, it's very fast, but as soon as you go down that route, detaching your data, it's not native in FileMaker, the end users can't use the FileMaker platform to do searches on it and stuff like that. So that's where you lose it. Yeah, I agree, Tony. I think there's aspects of that you can use, but I've yet to find it native in FileMaker. That's the problem.
My final suggestion is if you sell less product, it'll become easier.
Yeah, the current market share at the moment, certainly with online booming for us, that's not going to happen.
All right, just a thought.
Gary,
I like your idea.
I was on a FileMaker Pittsburgh user group about a month and a half ago, and Scott Kuntz was on there. I don't know if some of you know him, but he has this enormous, I think, 18 million record database for the liquor industry in like northeastern United States, or maybe just Pennsylvania. But I think daily he has to harvest, a ton of records, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, from some industry database, and he constructs a data cube on the fly. And the way he does it is he downloads these files, he generates a SQL, it's not even a SQL command, it's basically a command line command to SQLite. He pre-processes his data cube using SQLite, which is very fast, and then just pulls it straight into FileMaker. So he constructs it outside of FileMaker and then just absorbs it. And he says it's really quick and really efficient. And I thought it was an interesting approach. We've got him booked for .fmp on Saturday. He's doing the simplex method there, but I've been trying to talk him into his SQLite session as well. So if you want to sort of see what he's up to there, it's pretty interesting how he's got that rigged up.
That's, I think you're reading some of the challenges I've tried on this, Chris. I think you've nailed one of them. Is I brought same thing for the cumulatives. I couldn't process the cumulative data quick enough, and our cumulative is literally 25 years of data. That 18 million is the 6 months. So if I do 20, we've got an instance where I have to process the 25 millions, and that is, or 25 years of stuff, and that's hundreds of millions of records. Wow. So I bring that into Click and I process it, and that can churn through that and summarize that within about a minute. Nice. So it's really quick, great method, and it's just, that's where I was looking at it. But if I go down that route, I'm going to end up, and we will discuss this more in the virtual bar, I'm going to end up having to do a truncate on every table every night. I can get the data out quickly, and then I'm going to have to do a truncate and an update of every table. And that's where I'm trying to look at whether or not, and that's why I was thinking maybe one wide table would be better, because then I just truncate one table, upload one table, and all I'm putting in there is 500,000 records, because that's the products. That's where I was leaning towards going. But everything I've read says super wide tables, really, really bad. And it is, and we know that. We've known that for years. So
well, not necessarily. It depends, because what you've got is you've got two requirements, and they conflict. You've got the really fast transactional requirement of your POS system, and that's got to be super, super quick. But your data warehousing requirements, actually, that's where you want to go to a denormalized structure that is wider. But obviously the issue you've got is the processing time to do that. And so it's kind of, and I guess I'm not quite sure why not just use Click for this.
There is that, and I'm leaning the customer over to Click to do this. So we've got it all in Click, and it's there. We've got everything in there. It's now a business decision on Click, due to the fact that a licensing Click costs £300 a year. So whereas we've got a site license in FileMaker, and it's got that point now where they've gone to Click and gone, this is great, can we build this in Click? And then they go, can we have this for every user of the business? Well, no, because I don't have 150 licenses in Click, and if you want that, it's going to cost you an extra 20 grand a year. So it's that point. Yeah. I agree with you, Ian. I think we could do this. I could do this in Click in 2 minutes, but it's that thing of, well, can I just have this bit of data in FileMaker and have that bit of data? We're reaching the boundaries of where I think the limits of FileMaker is.
Yeah.
But I was hoping for divine inspiration from one of you lot. Yeah, this is what you want to do. And I go, yeah, brilliant.
I've not looked into it in great detail, but a lot of the stuff I've been doing with Python lately, there's some tools there that Pandas, which is basically built for sort of dealing with big data tables and matrices. And I do remember being slightly surprised when I read the documentation and said that it started to get slow when you started to deal with large volumes of data. And when they were talking about large volumes, they were talking like 50 million lines or more.
Yeah.
So there are systems. I mean, the what's considered large for FileMaker, and obviously you guys are pretty large, just about no matter what you're dealing with. But you're certainly pushing the limits of FileMaker.
In certain areas, yeah. And I think if I can summarize it, that may be the way I go, is I just summarize it third party outside and then bring the result, the summary in. At least it takes the trend. And that's what I've been trying to do with what we're saying about the dailies to the weeklies to the monthlies.
Yeah.
We're trying to educate them. They want to go 4 weeklies, and they go, can you just go to a month? You go to a month, I don't have to worry about it. I can just go 1 month, 2 months, 3 mons, 4 months, and it's quick and easy data. I can summarize it easy. So it may be a change in methodology of the company in that respect. It might be easier. If you want it in FileMaker, well, you're not going to go 4 weeks, you're going to go monthly. Because they went, 4 weeks, and then we go quarterly, and they said, quarterly needs to be 13.3 weeks. I was like, really? So, and you just can't calculate that easily. It's a lot easier to go January, February, March. That works. But no, 13.3 weeks is how they divide the year up from a finance point of view. So anyhow, look, it's a discussion. Happy to go if anyone's got, and well, want to grab a session in the virtual bar, I can spin up a separate meeting so we don't bore everyone with it. It's not a problem. I can fire an invite out to everybody. But I wouldn't mind a bit more discussion on this, and I can certainly demo the scenario of what we're challenged with. So it might give a bit more understanding of the question. But fine, I appreciate the comments, guys. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so more of that in the virtual bar later. John, are you ready to go? I mean, I'm trying to be slightly ahead of schedule if we can. Are you ready to go, John?
Yeah.
I think we'll get straight in there then. That's all right. I'll pass it over to you.
Let's try this then. You can see my PowerPoint and you can hear me, yes?
Yep.
Yes.
Marvelous. Okay, so for people that didn't come last time, a really quick couple of slides just to review why we're doing what we're doing. And it's about OData. There's a link with some useful learning resources. So you can screenshot that, or you can get it in a presentation later. And the first thing is, this is FileMaker 19 on FM Cloud or Linux server only at the moment. We can all quiz Doug later about when it's coming to Mac and Windows. And it's because the PHP and XML gateways are going away. So to get data out of your FileMaker servers is going to be either the data API or OData, both of which are metered. There's a Claris help document, and in there is the link to Steve's demo file, part of which we'll look at in a moment, so you can go and grab it yourself if you haven't already. In your FileMaker server, in Linux, there's a OData connector which you need to enable. You now get a log for FM OData, and we'll look at what's actually in that. And importantly, there's now a new permission in your file to be able to allow somebody to access your file using OData, and that is really important for when you want to change the schema, particularly. The difference between the data API and OData is that the data API, as you know, uses tokens, which then means you have to manage those tokens, kind of store them somewhere, and they expire. And it's all based on somebody knowing FileMaker layouts, and you create a layout for your data API response. But you do get container data as you can get container data as a stream, which isn't metered. The difference with OData is its basic authentication. It's only based on a table occurrence, but you can get the table occurrence name right up front, so you can deal with developers who change things. Containers provide some special issues, both putting data in and getting data out. But the big thing is that with OData, we can change the schema, and we can also batch transactions all together in one go as a transaction, and we'll show that. So really simply, like any kind of API, we've got our base URL, which includes the file name. And after that, we've got a set of special modifiers to modify the data. And we've got parameters which we can use to filter the data. We'll show how all of that works. So your URL will look something like this. The OData version that FileMaker is using is version 4.0. There is like a 4.1, but it's quite stable, and it's been at 4 for quite a long time. And then after the kind of base URL, we've got a question mark, like in PHP or anything else, where we then have the parameters afterwards, which are all separated by an ampersand. You just add them all together. But the headers in our requests can also modify the returned result. And I'll show you one example where the order of those headers may or may not be important. All of that needs to be URL encoded. It is also case sensitive, but the big thing is that, as you might expect, it respects record locking and validation. won't spend any time. We might come back to this. Number fields can be a bit of an issue. The big thing is about why. So it's about giving external access to your FileMaker data with tools that are not specific to your developer style, because they're based on like SQL. So you have to think of it as a SQL over the web to query some data. There's a pool of external expertise already on using OData. A large part of SAP installations can be queried via OData. So you can find all kinds of answers on Stack Overflow about how to construct a query. And clearly what it means is we could tap into people who can do clever things with our data because they already know the language that is being used to access it. So let's dive into, I'm going to look at both FileMaker and maybe Postman together. So this is the beeswax demo file. There is a hosted sample data file that just looks like this. Some very simple records, a UID, first name, last name, a favorite number, a birthday, an image, and this field I've added, which is the get record ID. So as you can see, it goes from 1 to 33 at the moment. And then this file, which we're going to walk through in a special order. We're not going to do all the records, we're just going to do a really quick. Let's dive in. And this file is running an OData query on this hosted file. So the answers we'll be able to see come from here or modified data in here. But the very first thing we're going to do is just look at Postman. The first time you run let me get some metadata back from this file, it's pretty surprising when it comes back as XML, which of course, as we all know, FileMaker doesn't have very good tools to manage. But I am going to show you one important thing here, is that, so entity type is what we call a table. So we have a table here called activity. And in that table, the key for that file is a field called unique ID. So that's set, you know, when you have your default fields XML, which you can fiddle around with and you can set whatever field you want. If you have that set, whatever field that is set behind the scenes, that is a field that can be used as a key to the record, not just like it used to be using the hidden get record ID from FileMaker. But if we create a header of accept application JSON and run the same command, bingo, we'll get it all back as JSON. That's the only place where you have to specifically do that accept header. All the others will by default come back as JSON. If you want it as XML, you have to ask for it. So let's dive back into there. So let's do a really simple. So in this file, really quickly, the host name, the file name, and the table name, not unlike in Postman, are replaced with the references to this file. It just means that it's kind of generic. What we've got in here as a walk around is these are the headers that are being sent. And if there's any request content, it's in here. And what we get back in here is the response. So I just want to go, give me all the records from this table, please. Let's send it. And here we go. So it comes back as a big block of JSON, which does include some extra OData specific fields. Effectively, the context, this says the context is this file called person, a table called person, which is in this file here. You can see it is the table called person. So we get some details about where it comes back from. We get 2 extra bits of OData. So effectively, it's a little more noisy than getting data back from the data API, but then we just get the record back as you might expect. in JSON, one of the big surprises is that the date field doesn't come back as American format, month, day, year. It comes back as ISO format, year hyphen month hyphen day. Just something to bear in mind. But essentially, that's just a query that says, give me everything there. Here's a whole set of records as a big block of JSON. So if we want to select a specific record, after the table name in brackets, because we know that we're using this unique ID as the key in there, I can say, can I have back that record that's got that key, please? So clear the result, send the request again. There you go. It's that record. So if I just pick a different record and paste it into here instead and send the request, it's not there. And the reason is because I didn't paste it properly. So I think if I take that extra 9 off, it'll now run. Okay. So that's a different record. So that's one way to get a specific record if you know what it's what the key field is and what the key value is. So obviously we don't tend to do that kind of stuff, but what we're more likely to do is go, okay, in this case, let me find something matching a criteria. And here's where we're going to build. If a search here is where you filter the records. So think of it like a filtered portal where you put something in a field and say, if the records in this table match, have this in it, that's what this is doing. So the same query, but question mark $filter equals last name, %20 of course is space, EQ for equals. So the filter is the last name equals dog. So let's just look in the records here. There is somebody whose last name is dog. So if I search for them, I'm going to expect to find that record. There we go. Darius dog. So let's find something that we know doesn't exist, and we're going to get back an empty array of values. Okay, we get an answer, but the answer is empty. So now in this example file, if you then click this button which says reset example, it resets the example so that it'll work again, so that it doesn't. So the idea is to encourage you to go through this, changing a few things, seeing what else you can find. So we know that mule does exist. Send the request. There we go. But we did say it's case sensitive, so let's try that. Send the request. Can't find anything. This search is case sensitive. We can modify this so that, like in SQL, we could say, can we have the lowercase version of the last name equals mule? And then that obviously would work. Let's go to another quick example. So once we've got a set of records back, we can sort them. So in this case, the command is to order by. So just relate it to your SQL knowledge. Order by the first name space descending. So that in fact gives me all of the records in the table sorted in descending order. So we've got a last name of a first name is it sorted by, so a W is at the end. So if I just change that to ascending, you can all work out what's going to happen now. It's not going to be a W, it's going to be something starting with A. Okay. So you can see how it is there's a lot of similarity in this part of building the filter and the query to how SQL works. We can limit the set as well. So the same set order by first name ascending, and what I want is to just bring back the ID field and the first name field, and only bring back the top 3. Okay, so in this blue text in the right is a bit of an explanation of what that is for each of the examples. So if I run the example, what I get back is in fact 3 records in alphabetical order, starting from A, Abigail, Ada, and Adeline. So if I obviously change this to 4, run it again, then I've got 4 examples back. So select is one of the ways in which you limit the data that comes back. When using the data API, what we have to do is build a layout that only has on it the fields that we want to see in the returned result. So we limit the amount of data that's coming back. This is the way in OData to limit which fields you want data back from. So that, but obviously we don't have to build a special layout to do it. We just do it programmatically. As well as this, I just want the top 3. I can offset. It's not offset as it is in SQL, but it's skip. So I'll run that again. So instead of it starting with A, it's now jumped to the 12th record or 13th record, and it starts at E, F, and G. In SQL, one of the things we all do in SQL is to just do a count. Say, are there any of these records here? And literally, all we have to do after the table name is do $count. It's not even a query. So all this says is, can I have a count of the number of records in the table? So if we go over to here, you will see that there are indeed 29 records. So the count just gives me 29. This only clearly takes up 2 bytes because it only gives you a 209. It's not strictly true because there's all the rest of the header stuff with it, but it's a very efficient way to just see if some data is in fact there. But the count also works with a query, but in this particular case, the count here isn't part of the query. It's part of the URL string. So I want a count from this URL of this filtered set. So count how many records have a first name that starts with a capital D. Sorry, just let me send that request. There we go. There's 1. So let me pick a different letter. Just tell me how many records start with A, and there's 9 of them. So all following? Getting data from the record. Let me just dive back to there. There are 2 special fields which are fields you'll recognize if you've been doing XML with FileMaker for a long time. There's row ID and row mod ID. The row ID is the equivalent to the internal get record ID, and the row mod ID is the old modification count. If you look at the Postman output in XML, it does tell you, just let me find it, give me 1 second. I should have highlighted this. It does tell you in the XML, it tells you the name of those 2 fields. So in OData data, like often in SQL, there's an internal, record number. This says the best row ID is going to be something called row ID. It's not an actual field name. It's a FileMaker's generated thing. And the row version So if you use a query which says, okay, I want to do something with row version, it uses the row mod ID. So as well as returning from this record, I want favorite number, I'd also like back the row ID and the row modification ID. So let me pick a different record just to show that the data does change. Oh, come on. I think we're better at pasting than that. There we go. That's the row ID of 18, but the modification ID is still 2. I'm going to show where that can be used in a short while. If you have the correct permission, you can delete this record as well. So we're going to actually experiment with doing that. That record is this record here. So it's the third one from the bottom. I'm going to make sure I'm not in it. I'm going to run that, and you're going to see that it's now disappeared. It's all right. We're going to put it back in a moment so it doesn't feel lonely. We can create a new record instead. So when we create a new record, we need to send, we send, like you might do with the data API, a JSON block of this is all the data that we're going to put in here. I'm going to break this deliberately for a moment. So I want to create a record with this birthday with a favorite number of 999 and with this first name and last name. And what we've got back is an error, 507 error. And the reason is there is a validation at field level in this table, which says that the first letter of the first name has to be the same as the first letter of the last name. So if I go back and change this so that in fact does match and click OK, what I get back is, again, what you might expect from the data API. I get back the record with the data that I've put in, the unique ID of the record, which obviously was generated on the fly, and the record ID, which was generated. Now, there are times when actually you don't want all of that data there, and there is an extra header that you can put in, which is a prefer header. Return, I think it's return equals minimal. I do hope that's correct. And when I send a request, the record was created again, but I've got apparently no data back. But what you do in fact get back, so it's you do in fact get in your HTTP headers, you get back, I think I modified this file so we can see it. There we go. You get back this as your headers. So you actually get a 204 returned. There is just no content. So one of the ways to minimize the amount of, so if you added a record which had lots and lots and lots of fields, rather than getting all of the data back and paying the penalty for that, you know that a 204 error says it did work, but I'm not sending you anything back. And the reason I'm not sending you anything back is because you asked me not to send anything back, please. So that's one way of reducing your turnpike for FileMaker data. You can, of course, run a script in the same way that you can with the data API. There's a special format in the URL for it. So you use script dot and then the script name. So in this sample file, there is a script called recreate a sample record. And I'm just going to modify this so that the favorite number is something like that, so we can sort of prove it works. So if I fire off that, that's created a record. That's the number I typed in by running a script. So you don't have to, you know, obviously there are all kinds of methodology. People are discovering and discussing what are the best methodologies to do some of the various tasks. And it may be that you create a record or modify a record in a table with a massive JSON payload and then run a script against that table to pick up the data and do various things with it. So I wanted to look at this. I hope it doesn't make your eyes hurt, but one of the big things that OData will do is do multiple things in one go together. Okay. So a $batch after the end says, what I'm going to send you is a batch record. So if you're used to writing multi-part HTML emails, this will not be that surprising to you. But we're going to say that the content I'm going to send you isn't JSON anymore. It's a mixed multi-part content with this as the boundary ID. The boundary ID just has to be a unique ID. So this says, here's a boundary marker. I'm going to send you an HTTP request. Sorry, I'm looking at the sample. That's my mistake. There's a boundary request. I'm going to send you an HTTP request, which is a post to this URL with this bit of JSON. And we do need the content length when we do it this way. And then here's a boundary marker. And then here's another command. I'm going to post. So I'm going to create another record here. And then I'm going to create another record here. And then here's the end of boundary marker. So what I would expect here is that rather than making 3 requests to the OData, to the server, in one go, I can create those 3 records. So we currently have 31. Send a request. There you go. 3 new records appeared at the bottom. There's 34. I did only send the first name and the last name, not the rest of the name. If I want to add other stuff to that, I'd have to change the content length, obviously. The return says, yeah, it was all done. Thank you very much. As well as creating records, you can, using the same methodology, you can modify multiple records. So instead of a post, we're going to patch, which obviously, as you understand, means change this record with this unique ID. And we're going to change it so the last name is elephant. And then we're going to change this record to this last name. So I'm just going to do 2 changes here. So let me try and move that across. Pretty sure that this is the one record here that we're going to change as a result of this request. Do that. There we go. That changed and that changed. So if I want to, I can obviously, there's some very interesting things. Now, one of the most interesting things about this is that, let me just go back to this modify record. I haven't got the modify record in there. Let's do it with this one. If I put my cursor into this field, which is one of the records that I know it was going to change, and then send the request, When you run it as a batch, it ignores the record locking, which is kind of interesting. It's not transactional, essentially. The batch will just run as long as it can. If you want it to be transactional, you do something called a change set. So this is a similar, it's a multi-part, but inside the outer boundary, we have something which starts with CS, which means I want you to treat this as a change set. So a change set only works if all of the items in the change set works. So it actually provides a method of using OData in a transactional way. So this is I've got a post in here to create a record, a post to create a record, post to create a record. If I send that, it will then all work. So I've now got another three or four fields at the bottom. But if I modify this, so as we know, I'll change this one. It'll fail if this now I've forced to be a failure because those aren't going to match. If I send that change set, what I'm getting back is a bad request because it didn't change. So let's just see 37 records, run the script, bad request, 37 records. So if I make it a good request again, find the D, 40 records. Okay, so there is a way of making our interactions with OData fully transactional. Here's a very interesting thing as well. So this says I would like to modify this record. Let me just change this number. So I'm going to modify this record. So what I'm doing is a patch against this specific record. Let's find the actual record so we can just bring that single one on screen. There's the favorite number. The favorite number is currently that. I'm going to say, right, I'd like to change the favorite number to 4,444, but only if the modification count is less than 4. So I'm going to run that, and it goes, oh, it didn't work. And the reason might be that the modification count, oh, I've changed the record, so now it has changed there, but it's given me back a check on the modification count. So now, if I try and run this again, it won't work. So we can lock records based on a modification count to external changes. So if I do that, a modification check of 7, that will also fail because it's not a specific 7, but it is in fact, modification count is 6. Final one. So I just wanted to, I've got a little database here. So this is a quick download of the log from this when I was messing about before. So one of the things, so in the OData log that's in the admin console, you get the results of the query. Okay, so this is the end part. It doesn't give you the host name, but gives you the everything after that. So at some point, a query was done for this, at some point a query was done for this. And obviously here we've got a filter starts with the first name of W. What that means is that every single query that has been run in this way is logged in the log, and there might be some very good reasons why you actually don't want that to happen, because effectively what it means is some data that's in the file can appear in the log. And when I was talking to Steve when he was creating this file, there's a very interesting smart workaround which says if you wrap the GET request inside a batch, because a batch is always posted, effectively you get the answer back. It's wrapped in the boundary, but here is the JSON that you would have got back from the GET. But because you did a post, that is not in fact logged. And what I was just going to do was quickly go to the admin console for that file and download the OData log so we can demonstrate that really does happen. To do that, file, import records from there, and do a replace with add. Thank you very much. Go to the last record. And as you'll see, because I did a post, the post just says, "Oh, you posted a batch." Doesn't tell me what the batch is or not. We thought that was quite a clever, a kind of a clever workaround. So in the file, I just kind of quickly shot through a selection of the records, 18 out of the 45. There's a whole series of other examples, not unlike when Jason Young created the SQL Explorer file. The idea of this is go and host the examples, the sample data, and then work through the examples, because the examples all work, and there's a teaching point on each of them to get used to how it might work. So I said last time, one of the things I've done with it, I haven't shown you, there are examples in there about creating, you need full access permission to be able to modify the schema, which is a really good thing, obviously. So one of the things I have done is I regularly get from the government an XML file which contains really complex XML with what is effectively the values for a value list, a code and a label. I decided as a bit of an experiment to use OData to say, if I started with a blank table that was in a known location, could I read the XML file, work out what field names I would need, create the field names, one with code underscore at the beginning and one with the name of the field. So I would create all the fields I needed in the file and then go back and loop over all of the XML nodes and generate the data I would need to then fill the table. So you start with an XML file and you end up with a FileMaker file, but all created via OData. Absolutely works. It's not, I haven't timed it, maybe 3 or 4 minutes, but there's some of the value lists have multiple thousands of values in them. One of the other things that I looked at doing was, I think, is it not in there, was to haven't got a slide on it, was to consider the idea of one of the great things about what this is enabling us to do is to completely separate files that have, so it's a proper data separation in that you don't have to have any file reference from file A to file B to be able to get data back into file A from file B. No external file references because you just do a query on it. And I'm looking at a theoretical. So one of the issues that we sometimes have to do in systems with multiple files is work out how you manage users. And obviously FileMaker has some script steps to do that. So I'm looking at using OData to fire off a query to a file which exists somewhere, which doesn't even have to be on this server, which can, and what I've done with that is that opens a card window in this file, because obviously you don't have to have a file reference for it in the same way. And what that's then doing is just going round the various files in a multi-file system, running an OData query to run a script to create user accounts. As a bit of an experiment. I'm about halfway through making it work properly. But there's a very interesting thing about when you start removing the file references, because FileMaker itself then doesn't have to trawl through the relationship graph to work out whether things are working. And it also means that there's a theory that it's a little more secure. So that looks like about my time, Joel. But if there's any quick questions now, I'll take them. I'm absolutely happy to receive, queries by phone or email if people want to chat to me about OData stuff kind of offline as well. Happy for that because I've done quite a bit of playing with it. And like I say, I helped Steve with his demo file a bit. So, but if there's any queries now, please fire away.
Great presentation, John. Really good.
Bit fast, I appreciate, but there's what I wanted was for you to all get used to the demo file and going, okay, that's in there, that's what's there, I'll get that back. The point about the demo file is it works. If you reset the example, it works every time. They all work. If you then break it, you can work out why you broke it. So it's a great starting point from that perspective.
A question I wanted to ask you, John, you said there was a way where you could obviously create the fields via that and so forth. I think it was on one of your slides on SQL and so forth. How are you denoting the field type, or did I miss that?
No, I think that's in my. So when you like when you create in SQL, you tell it, I want this field to be a varchar or a binary or something. The same is true in OData. So. Okay. Let me just see if I can quickly find the example, and I'll show you what. Can you still see that?
Yeah.
Let me go to the other half of the tape. Find all the records.
Because I like where you're going with this. So the idea is you're supplied a set of data from any source, and the reason why I'm looking at this is the fact that we are challenged at the moment with, if any of you are in buying product and selling products, you've got export information coming in from suppliers in all different formats for country of origin of every product. So I've got there's no structure to this. There isn't one. So I'm thinking I could use this to then grab file, build a dynamic database, and then parse the file to work out, well, that's the country of origin. It could be the 5th field, the 10th field, the 9th field, depending on the supplier that supplies that data.
I had a very interesting conversation with Dave Ramsey, who, as you know, is the guy that's written FM Comparison the other night, about whether or not what FM Comparison could do was take 2 versions of your XML and generate a diff. That's what it does. Mm-hmm. But if it generated a diff that then spat out something that you could run through a script that would go to file B and add all the fields that were in file A as your modification file, was really interesting methodology. But for example here, so this is the add a field to the table, okay?
Right.
Fields object. So we have a field called my new text field, and the type is a varchar. So let me just quickly show you there. Those are the fields, okay? My new field doesn't exist in there. just send that request. Here's a list of all of the fields and field types. Favorite numbers are decimal, birthday is a date. But if I also go back into the field definitions, my new text field is there. Okay, that proves it works. But like
can that dynamically work out that should be a number field? Is there any way you could do that from Parson and see where I'm going with this? So if the data supplied,
that's part of this, isn't it? You have to have something where you're generating this JSON block to generate the fields with the field name and the field type. So that involves you parsing one record in your data to say, if it's this, then we're going to assume it's a number. If it's this, we're going to assume it's a date. And if not, it's going to be a varchar.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But you can also, you can also do all the other things. So this will tell you, you can tell it to be the primary field, the primary key. You can tell it various other things in the same way that you can with SQL. You can limit it, so you can add some of the validation options. A little bit more work to do to kind of do that. But essentially, you patch the FileMaker tables table, which obviously we have access to through SQL. The record before this shows adding a whole table. So here's how to, you can add a table which includes all of the fields in it. So here, it's a varchar that's 100 characters long. It's a timestamp. So if you're used to SQL, it's a very similar kind of scenario.
Well, this looks like the XML and JSON import we have in the MBS plugin, where we create the fields for you if needed.
Yeah, but it doesn't need a plugin, Christian. So
yeah, but you know, it needs Linux.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's why Doug is on the call. And our next thing is, dear Doug, when have we got this in Windows and Mac, please? Over to you.
Actually, John, can I ask one really quick question?
Yeah.
That was really good presentation. With the transactional stuff, with the change sets, if it doesn't update, so it returns a 400 bad request error?
Yes.
So how do you distinguish between sort of, say, a malformed request and not updating for transactional reasons? Like, say, record locking or something.
That's a really good question that I can't give you a quick answer to.
Maybe Douglas can answer it.
Yeah, maybe we should. That's a really good question, and partly because I haven't necessarily delved all the way to the bottom of the well, and partly because it's a whole. The whole point about this is it's a brand new thing, and only people who've got Linux have been playing with it for now. So we haven't necessarily pushed the boundaries of all the use cases. We haven't necessarily found out what all the simple use case, which is much more updating one record at a time, is sensitive to user locking. So if you try and update a record, but you've got your cursor in the field, it's just like a regular record lock. Okay, cool. Back saying, sorry, can't do that. But I do agree, when it's a change and you try and do multiple things, it just fails. But maybe I'll give you a call tomorrow and we'll have a chat about it.
Yeah, actually, cool. I'm sort of very much at a hello world kind of stage with this. So, I'd be interested.
Okay, John, are you going to be around in the virtual?
I'll be around in the virtual bar if you want to ask me separately, or like I say, I'm happy. If you want to email me or give me a bell, happily kind of chew the fat with you about it and just talk about examples and stuff. So, thank you.
Okay, that was great. Thank you very, very much, John. That was perfect, and leads directly and easily into Doug, who's now got some difficult questions to answer. And thank you for putting some comments in the chat there that were helpful at the end.
I'm not going to comment on anything that was done. It's brilliant. Yeah. So the thing is, on OData, it's kind of weird because we haven't got a lot of people actually kind of moving into it. So we're trying to drive a bit more traffic It's just that in terms of the API, we've actually had to do a lot of work to get it to work properly. So we're trying to increase the size of our team working on the APIs so that we can actually give it to, in the future, I'm not going to say the near future, but at least on the Mac, maybe not Windows, but at least have it available on Mac as soon as we can. So I was going to talk a bit about sort of stuff on Ubuntu, some of the new stuff. I'm not going to do a lot of demos because some of the stuff isn't really finished. And then you'll have that once we actually launch the next version of FileMaker, we'll do proper demos of all the stuff that we worked on. The one thing I want to talk about is the Linux version that we have. I know there's been a lot of comment on why we actually moved from one distribution to another. All I can say on this, it's a lot of politics, which is kind of very boring, but a lot of stuff that we do for like the Linux version is we use it both for the on server and for the cloud. And the cloud environment that we use is built in partnership with Apple and AWS. And when Red Hat started talking about a bit more than a year ago that they want to basically give up on the CentOS version of Linux, the InfoSec, so the security guys from Apple kind of got not another one. How do you actually move forward? Because there's a lot more services now within Apple that actually use AWS services and all the stuff on, I mean, basically just cloud-based systems. And because one of the idea that's been done within Apple is to remove all the data centers from being inside buildings to massive data centers everywhere, they've had to actually recreate a lot of the backend system to get everything to work. And to actually minimize the amount of support, kind of decided to actually went for Ubuntu, as it was the easiest and the most used distribution out there. As a subsidiary, we kind of have to follow the rules. And in terms of being a really sort of smaller department in Apple, it's kind of really hard for us to be able to actually support a lot of different versions of the same product. So already we have 2 support basically teams for Windows. We have to do Server 2019 and 2016. So we had double testing on that. On the Mac, we have to do that the 3 releases, Big Sur and 2 before that. On the Mac, we have to do Intel and ARM. We have to do the cloud and Server for Linux. And having Server for Linux on 2 different versions is basically too time consuming for us to be able to actually do bug fixes on all the environment at the same time and be able to actually have a cadence in terms of releases that's a bit more user friendly than before. So we basically went, well, CentOS is basically being not really killed, but kind of killed. We weren't really exactly sure what Red Hat was going to do. Not big fans of IBM in a lot of support parts of Apple because they kind of they take ages to do anything. So we just went, let's go for the next one that basically everyone's been asking for, which is Ubuntu. Works really nicely with AWS, and it's going to make our life a lot easier to actually go forward. So when we did the deprecation notice of CentOS, but you'll still be available on the electronic download page. So for the next, until I think October 2022, you will still be able to use the CentOS version. The one thing we're not going to do is we're not going to do specifically new features on the CentOS. But any security updates that we have to do will be done. So there's not going to be a 19.3 version of CentOS coming out when we do the next release. But there's going to be basically smaller updates around CentOS and essentially for security updates. So it's not that we're killing it, but the idea is to limit the support just to security updates. And then the focus for us is around Ubuntu. So if you've done an install on CentOS, and if you go on Ubuntu, the only difference is basically the tool that you use to do the install. Instead of being called yum on CentOS, it's called apt on Ubuntu. And apart from that, that's pretty much the only difference that you're going to have in the system. And the firewall, how do you mean the firewall? The installer for the firewall.
Yeah, the firewall. The firewall isn't Firewall D. It's something else, isn't it? Steve can tell me, but
it is Firewall D on Ubuntu now.
Oh, it's not. It's not. Whatever it was on CentOS that I played with, it's not. That's
it's not the same. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. So the first version that we're actually going to release is going to be supported on what they call the version 18.04 LTS. There's another version called 20.0 LTS. There's now going to be a newer version called 21.0. But basically, because the long-term supported version by Ubuntu, we kind of went for 18 as the first iteration. We're going to have 20. Hopefully, we'll have that before or just after we do Engage. And the idea is to be able to actually do it. But because the thing is that there aren't that many differences. It's just in terms of the packages and the third-party tools that we use, we're just going to make sure that everything works properly. The biggest problem that we have is really based on actually the fonts. So if you do a lot of stuff on WebDirect, or if you do stuff on the PDF and you want to create your PDF on the server, we use the fonts, which are they're not even OTF, they are fonts that have no link whatsoever with all the other providers of fonts. So like even stuff like the basic fonts that you have on everyone's machine, for Linux, you have to actually get another one. So it's kind of a bug because even Arial has a different name on Linux. Pretty much everything has to actually find a Linux-based version of that font. And so because we support multi-languages, we've had to find a system in the background to be able to actually sort of manage and play with the fonts properly. And we know that a lot of usage of Linux servers is to be able to work like a robot and be able to actually do a lot of stuff in the background.
Douglas, you mentioned you were going to release stuff after Engage, but Engage is now spread across the year. Is there a particular iteration of Engage you're referring to?
So there's a small Engage, and there's a small Engage, and then there's a smaller Engage. So it will be in the bigger of the small version of Engage. But like everything, like every year, like in October time, September time, we have like real schedule. So it should be able to. We should be able to actually read it at that time.
Thanks.
So what I'm going to do quickly is just for people that want to see. I'm just going to share my screen. How do you present now? I'm just going to do a quick. So even if you're not buying a Linux box, I mean, the joy of Ubuntu is you could install it on any like VirtualBox, Parallel Desktop. You can set up an Amazon account. You'll be up and running in about 20 seconds. And there's actually very little amount of stuff that you have to do in terms of actually running it. So I've got my little cheat note that we have got here. Basically, the one thing we're saying on the website, on the guide for people to be able to install it is, make this bigger. You basically have to do an update of, so there's two ways of actually, well, there's two ways. There's two things you have to do when you do an update of a Linux system. The first one is called the update, which is basically going to get a list from the mirror servers managed by Ubuntu of all the various third-party tools I use with the latest version. Then you upgrade. There's just two tools that we kind of need to be able to do install, which is unzipped, which you have to download. The one is called wget, but you can use whatever curl to download the FileMaker server file from our hosting servers, and then you just install that. So what I've done here, I've actually created my Ubuntu on Parallel Desktop. Takes about 9-10 minutes. Copied my FileMaker server. I've got the assistant text file. All I do basically is I run those kind of command lines. Basically is first one does the update, second one does the upgrade, second one's going to download, unzip, and then it's going to basically install FileMaker. I'll do it on this one. So it's grabbing a lot of stuff, basically everything that we need. So the first one, the updates, we'll get all latest update, then there's a few upgrades if it has to, grabs a lot of shit. And then when you go through the FileMaker installer, it's going to grab all the tools that it needs to be able to run it. So like you got like stuff like Python, OpenJDK, the fonts, a lot of libraries on like Node.js to be able to admin console. Basically, pretty much everything that you kind of need to get everything running. Normally, it is quite quick, so hopefully the demo gods will be with me today. And so on average is if you've done it on CentOS, you'll have to do the same stuff on Ubuntu. Pretty much is the same on both. And then from the test that we've kind of been doing, like with AWS, if you want to play with it, you can set up like a new account on AWS. They'll give Amazon will give you 12 months with the free tier, where you can set up instances which are free to use for about a year. I think they call that T4A or something like that, or T4G. I can't remember. And if you use the medium one, you can play with it, do some tests, and then see whether it's the way for you to go forward. But the one good advantage of Linux is you don't actually have to pay license costs to Microsoft, or you don't have to pay the prices of some of the Apple products if you think they are too expensive. But then with the Mac Mini M1, price-wise, they're pretty cool and they run extremely fast. I was hoping to do a demo of on the Mac M1. I just haven't received mine yet. It is stuck somewhere in the US because I work for the US now. They send it to my home address in the US, which doesn't exist. So it's kind of lost somewhere, and no one knows where it is. I'm like, well, it's kind of there's no Nantes in the US. So it's going to basically grab a couple of stuff. So you can see it's going to grab quite a lot of fonts to get WebRag to work properly, do PDFs on the server and stuff like that, all the libraries if you're out there. And there's a couple actually quite important, so you want to make sure that it runs properly. It grabs a huge amount of all the Solar certificates. Some of them actually go away because we don't need all of that. Then it's going to start basically all the services. Takes roughly about a minute yet, and hopefully it will work without any issues. So there is one thing which is kind of a bit of a pain with Ubuntu is it kind of and Apache too. It kind of doesn't really like hosting having a web server running inside it that's not completely controlled by Apache, and especially when there's an SSL certificate. So because FileMaker is shipped with a free SSL certificate, the Claris certificate, the first time you're going to basically open your window to get access to the admin console, it's going to basically come with an error saying is you actually have an invalid certificate, and you need to make sure to actually have a correct one. So if you on Safari, it's kind of easy because you can actually validate that. On the latest version of Chrome, it kind of blocks you all the way. So it's something, it's kind of a fix that we're trying to actually go around because it's a bit of a pain for people that actually don't know actually to use the admin console too well. As you can see, I've got this error now. So everything is pretty much the same as before. We haven't really changed much. Some of the big features is we've updated the Node.js that we use so that we are less prone to crashes of the admin console. In terms of the backups, nothing's really changed. The one thing you'll see is in terms of the script schedule for those who are not on the latest version. So now we've created a what we call the verify script schedule, which you can run whenever you want to. And the other two are the script sequence, which is this one. The name. This one. where you have the two new script steps that we created. One is called the purge temporary database script, and the other one is the verify all databases. The verify and this one pretty much does the same stuff, so you can actually use one or the other. And then the last thing we've added is we've expanded the log viewer. So one of the things that we're trying to get to is based on all the feedbacks, is to bring back some of the options that were available back in FileMaker Server 16, so roughly like 20 years ago. So the idea is to bring back basically a basic log viewer so that you can see all the stuff quite quickly that's working on your system. We're actually trying to get a interactive view for those of you on the ETS. Some of you have been actually playing with it. The idea is to be able to actually view multiple files at the same time. It does an aggregate of the information, and it's kind of easy to be able to actually see what's going on at any one time. So the backend tool that we use is something called AP Grid, which is we use the React version on that one. It's kind of quick. There's some stuff that's really annoying. It's kind of hard to be able to actually do a filtering. So on this option, you can do some sort. You have option to do some filtering. The system likes doing filtering on dates, but it doesn't like really doing too much on time. So you have to do some hacks. And I know that FileMaker develop a lot of hacks, but in an environment, it doesn't work too well. So we're trying to find a way, because normally if you have like an issue in your system and you want to see it in that interface, it's normally you want to actually like do a time range, or because of a user saying, well, at that time I was trying to do this, and then you'll be able to actually see what's going on. So this is the first iteration of the log viewer. The idea is for people to start using it. We're going to grow the ETS to actually have more people on that and to get more feedback. And what we're going to try to do is make sure that what we can actually create is based on needs from users. And then we can explain sometimes to users why some of the features that are being requested can't be done, because sometimes it just doesn't work properly. And the other reason we've actually put the logs into a different menu now is to be able to actually sort of increase that over the months to come, to be able to actually offer more options for admins and even for basic users to be able to actually see what is actually going on in their systems. And we've noticed that basically being able to see logs is actually quite useful. So this is one of the areas we're going to actually be able to track it. The other thing is, on top of that, is because we are using the same Ubuntu version both on the server version and then the cloud version, we are trying to get the parity between the two systems to be closer to one another. So one of the things that's been, I'll just go to my console, requested a lot is be able to do, be able to easily create script scheduling inside of FileMaker Cloud. So we've actually been able to do that now. So the two new features you'll see on the cloud will be script scheduling, where we've only giving access to be able to run FileMaker scripts. So you'll find it on the configuration script schedule. Then you can create one. The only option for the time is FileMaker scripts. You can do as many as you want. They run the same way. And the logs, where for the time being, all we're going to basically allow you to see is the viewing one log at a file, be able to actually download that, and eventually we'll move the interactive view on that side to get it to work properly. And that's pretty much all the stuff that we've done. A lot of the work that we're doing is actually on cleaning up the code, both on the server side and the pro side. A lot of the work was done to actually get FileMaker Server for Mac available natively on M1 machines. So we've had to actually pretty much the work was transferring the work from CentOS to Ubuntu, and then transferring a lot of the work from the Mac Intel to the M1 chip. And that takes a huge amount of time because the transfer knowledge is actually quite high. And then we have to get every grid of people actually sort of from support all the way down from the engineers to be able to actually play with it and do a lot of stuff with it. So it's it takes a lot of time to just do those. So once we've actually shipped those two, then we'll be able to actually work a bit more on be able to actually provide new features than the rest. The other thing is Ubuntu, and like we've been saying, is like when we were mentioning cloud first, I think the terminology that we use is cloud first. We never, at least for me, is we never meant FileMaker cloud first. The idea was to really get into this idea that cloud, whatever it might be, could be hybrid, could be your own virtual public one, could be private, but to get really people to actually sort of move to that environment. And like when people used to actually have Mac Minis on top of a fridge running FileMaker server, which might be the ideal all the time, but we've seen with COVID, it's a lot better if you have actually those into proper data centers. So if you love the Mac, you can actually now get it from AWS. They have like Mac Minis, I think the M10, and they're kind of getting the M1 as well. Fair enough, it's really expensive. I think it's around $9,000 a year for the M1. Yeah, because if you start, so the thing is the way they've done the pricing is they've done the pricing the same way as they're doing the pricing for other machines. So in terms of the CPU, it isn't that expensive. It's just the amount of RAM that you have is more than the average, and then the EBS, because it's a SSD on the Mac, the price is kind of big, and because they can actually control the traffic inside it, they just went crazy. I think it's kind of very expensive. But there's a company in the US, I think you'll know it, Mac Stadium, who's now offering free M1 hosting if you're creating an app or something for an ONG or for Goodwill or stuff like that. So not for public sort of creation, for private or for a commercial development, but for another environment actually going into that. And there is a lot of talk from within a lot of sort of hosting companies to start bringing back the M1 as an option to be able to do some of the hosting. And the reason we're moving really sort of and pushing a lot more for Linux versus the Mac or the Windows is you can do whatever you want with it. If you want to use Docker, Kubernetes, whatever, our idea is to basically be able to offer that to our users and go, if you want to basically go for Docker and create your own system with that, go ahead with that. And but we need to actually make sure that we have traffic of users going to Linux for us to sort of spend more time creating and even being able to produce various distribution of Linux based on users on demand. So we're going to start working. I've got one guy looking at doing the ARM version of Linux for Windows for FileMaker server. We're kind of looking into those areas and playing with it and seeing whether it's a lot of work for us and whether it could actually help people play with it. I mean, it would be ideal if people could have like FileMaker server on a Raspberry Pi running in a factory and do its stuff like we all love it. So this is kind of the stuff that we want to do. So you see this, it's kind of, I mean, it's called 19.3. You'll see the name quite soon. Kind of release where it looks like not a lot is actually going out, but if you just basically take the M1, the change to Ubuntu, and the amount of work that has to be done to get those two sorted, it's kind of hard to actually have newer features on top of that with all the testing that's actually involved. And then on the Pro side, so the Pro is pretty much the same. A lot of work was done. So the two new stuff you'll see on Pro is the M1 support, and then the other one is the integration of the new WebKit from Edge inside directly inside the code of FileMaker. So we're not going to rely on the browser of the Windows machine. The kind of WebKit for the web viewers will be inside the FileMaker app itself. So it's going to be a bit more 21st century, and hopefully we'll have less bugs in web viewers for Windows users than we currently have. It's something that we've been trying to do for a long time, but we had to wait for Microsoft to release the Edge Suite engine. The proper version that we could start working on it actually only came back like I think 9 months ago, and even less than that. So, but the more basically updates they are, the better it's going to be. And then we're not going to be reliant on people updating their Windows machine. It will be currently sort of inside FileMaker. So if we can basically make sure that it works better, we might push people to actually move to latest version quicker than usual. So JavaScript should or will work a lot better, and all the stuff that wasn't working at all on the Windows machine will actually now be working.
Douglas, in the past, I've used, both with Cloud 1 and Cloud 2 for large databases when I tried to upload them using the regular, upload feature, and I'm talking about an 80 gigabyte database here. It would time out for both Cloud 1 and Cloud 2.
Yeah.
And so for Cloud 1, I was able to SSH into it and just put it up that way, and I'd have to modify privileges. But with Cloud 2, you didn't have that option. Is there, with you seem to be fairly familiar with the new Ubuntu FileMaker server. Is there any way to throttle the timeout there or something like that so that, if I try and upload an 80 gigabyte file, it doesn't time out and crash?
Yeah, so two things that we've done is on our end, we've actually upped the timeout. So before it used to be set to actually quite low, I think it's about 5 seconds. We've put it back to about 30 seconds. The only difference that we've done is we're using multi-part upload now. So basically, when we have your file, we cut up into sort of smaller parts and then send one after the other, that we can actually track a bit better what's going on. And within the admin API, which has been updated as well, you'll have the option to be able to do a multi-part upload of your file to your account, which should actually sort of make the upload a smoother journey. The other thing that we've done in terms of the back office is we've been able to give the customer support a few more access, because sometimes, like on the website, we said that normally you can upload a file up to 185 gigabytes, and that should work. And a lot of time it doesn't work. So what we do is we name and tell the client to actually put that on a WeTransfer, whatever type of account, and then we basically take the file and then we put it in your environment through an SSH port that we have, and then you've actually got access to it. So if you have issues, go through support, and they'll be able to actually help you with the upload. But we know there's kind of an issue in terms of that environment. The main reason why is some of our engineers at first didn't understand why someone will actually upload a FileMaker file with like 150 gig of information inside it, where the assumption was like, well, no, they have a file and then they have containers. The binary files are actually separately, so we don't ship the whole file in one go. We have the FileMaker file and then all the binary files on the side, which we can upload one after the other. Then we have to explain that a lot of users have everything in the FileMaker file: the data, the containers, the images, the PDFs from the last 20 years into one big file. And when that file crashes, everything goes ballistic. But that's how a lot of people actually do it. Kind of have to backtrack to see where we can get to.
Is that setting hackable? I mean, on Ubuntu, do we have the ability to toggle the timeout on our own, or?
No, you wouldn't be able to, because that is a cross the platform, cross the FileMaker cloud environment. That's a static value. The only thing you'll be is to go through the admin API is to be able to actually do the multi-part upload. But you wouldn't actually be able to actually hack anything inside.
Too bad.
Yeah. No.
Douglas, if you say for my presentation, you'll hear me say this at the end, but maybe you can tell me, what does .exfac.json do? Other than it suppresses the you must upload the certificate now, which is what I'm using it for, are there any side effects of manually creating that?
They wouldn't be, from what I can understand, because I saw it. I think it was you put it on community, didn't you?
Yeah.
Or the ETS.
Yeah, ETS.
There's something basically to make sure that the FAC doesn't get launched too early. And so it's putting a barrier and saying, okay, make sure the Node.js and the web server for FAC is launched properly. Then once it's all up and running, create that file and then put it in there just to say that it's okay for the user to go on the FAC. But I'll double check.
Then it's possible that there's a bug there, that it's not getting written soon enough on a clean install, because you can get to the FAC and it insists that you have to upload a certificate, even if you've already imported one through the FMS admin.
Okay, good one.
It looks as though that file may only be written if you upload your SSL certificate through the web interface then.
Okay, I'll check that one and I'll come back to you.
Yeah, okay, now that I know a bit more about what it's doing, I'll look at it a bit more and see if I can work out what the thing is. But yeah.
Let me see what it is. Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Cool. Any other thing that you want to know? There's more, but like we've seen on other stuff that we send like to partners and communities, if you want to test out any new function of FileMaker next version, what you have to do is send an email to email ets@claris.com, and then we'll add you to the ETS. That way you can play with the latest version of FileMaker Pro, server. If you want to do a lot of stuff with the cloud, and you don't want to pay too much, but you want to do testing, send me an email, and I'll create ETS accounts for you. So don't be shy is the word.
Yeah, people in this group are known for that.
Yeah. Wrong group, I think, Steve.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. The Ubuntu, when did you say you're going to move to LTS 2004?
I'm trying to get the guys to do it for October time.
Okay, yeah.
But then I just saw that today 21 was being released, so we'll see which one we go for.
Don't support the odd number ones. Just support the LTS ones.
Yeah.
Don't waste your time on the intermediary ones, because 1604 is still supported now. So the LTS ones are supported for so long that there's no value in wasting your time trying to support the 2104, because that'll be almost dead before you're ready to support it.
Yeah.
He says shyly.
No, I like the fact you've moved to Ubuntu, because we run our whole web infrastructure on Ubuntu, and we run Salt Stack to deploy it all and all that sort of stuff. So, for us, for me, once we move into this, I'm just going to pass literally FileMaker management over to my web team and just go deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's why I mentioned Nginx. We use Nginx instead of anything else. So, and that's only purely for scale of the website, because Apache just chokes with too much traffic on it. So if it supported it, I've got the infrastructure already set up, ready just to deploy it. So if not, it's fine. Give my web team a headache.
Yeah,
so
not for the time being. Yeah. And some of the stuff we're waiting for on the long term is where Microsoft and the server product, where they are thinking of actually really heading in the next just like 3-4 years. And even the long-term plan for that side, because if we do feel that even on the Microsoft side, they're kind of going, maybe we draw the product, or we move maybe to Linux, whether we might just do the same and just go, well, actually nowadays, for anything that is data servers or anything around it has to be on Linux, we might just go for that. So it's we'll see. A lot of it is because a lot of it's politics, but once we it'll be nice to be able to and even like do integration of FileMaker server, the installer inside directly the repository of Ubuntu, so that anyone can actually install it without having to go to the website, download it, figure stuff. If you could just do a sudo app FileMaker server and have it up and running, then that will be ideal. So stuff that we're working on.
Great.
And get there.
that'd be very good if you can get that done.
Yeah.
So, Doug, quick question. The perennial, it turns up on the forums a lot, the perennial, why can't we use Let's Encrypt for the SSL? It's okay for you to say the answer is Apple, but sometimes that just needs repeating. Or if the answer isn't Apple, is there any move to do it? Because essentially, what that gives you is the protection that you need to be able to encrypt the traffic. You're not susceptible to hacks, which is why you might use an SSL in other circumstances. So any comment on that?
So the easy one is customer support. If we do, so we could just do this one. The problem is there might be others. So what we're looking to do in terms of customer support is to be a bit more sort of security orientated, so they actually have more information. And the issue is with that we're already getting with SSL certificate is a lot of people, they have no idea what they're doing. So they're being told, buy one, go to this website, buy this, do this, and kind of get lost. So even on the interface for the new for server 19.3, we've made it easier to create the request. CSR, sorry. So you type in your information, you click CSR, it gives you the PM5, you put that in your stuff. So already that is, we're trying to make it easier. And then the next step will be to be able to increase the amount of providers or authorities that we can support. So the main term is about supporting, is what we can say we've been able to test, support, and then we can give help to people when they're actually using it.
Wouldn't it be easier just to say, to build Let's Encrypt into the installer so that the only provider is Let's Encrypt, which is fully automated? You can build it into the installer, and then you only have to support one certificate signing authority, not all of the different authorities?
The problem is when you start talking to larger customers, or depending on the on type of customers, they'll ask for a different one. So that's the, it's always a problem you have to go for the big one. So we need to find a way to actually, I understand, to make it easier, but we can't just pick one. We're picking the Gigi said, the bigger one at the top. Then we'll see where.
I used one. Was it Zero SSL, and they have a very simple REST API to issue and renew your certificates, and it costs nothing. So you can use the API to do that within your whole setup. It's not a problem.
I mean, the basic issue is it's got to be automated. To have a manual process to update certificates is very. It's like 20 years old. It's just it's an ancient way of doing it.
Well, and particularly now, as we have to do it every 364 days.
That's soon going to be less, John. That's going to be less, John. That's about that. I'll tell you. Give it another year. Yeah, give it another year. It'll be down to 3 months.
Really?
Year's time. The essays are going to be after updated every 3 months. My concern is, did you say the big
API schedules?
Yeah, exactly.
No problem.
Yeah. So you're saying the big customers. When you've got like big players like Facebook, Cisco, all using Let's Encrypt. I don't understand why you're saying the big players. There's bigger players than clients that FileMaker has customers of that use Let's Encrypt.
I'm talking internally within company using different type of providers of certificate.
Well, I wouldn't have thought FileMaker has any customer big enough to say Let's Encrypt shouldn't be supported.
It's not being supported. Is if we increase the amount of authority we want to support, we have to actually add quite a few more. We can't just say, okay, let's encrypt, because there are going to be others that people are basically going to be asking for. So if we decide to increase the amount of authorities that we support, it has to basically work for both us and the users. So I fully understand that a lot of people want Let's Encrypt. The problem is that on our end is we have to figure out how we can actually support that, and how we're fitting within the Apple sort of security guidelines to be able to actually offer a new one that we fully support.
And then there's also the kind of domain kind of authentication or authorization that you do actually own that domain for the SSL, right? So whether it's by email or HTTP or DNS entry, you've got to think that in. How is it going to be authenticated? So yeah.
Hey, Doug, on the question of support for the digital certificates, it was at a DevCon, I asked the team, what's your #1 support question? And they said, one year they said FilePass, and the next year they said digital certificates. So I just emailed you a infographic that we did about how to install a digital certificate. And my thinking is that someone calls up, I want to install it. You just send them a one-page PDF. You can use the one I sent you, and boom, your support cost goes down. And they'll still probably need help, but we did it because it's like first time's hard. We do it again 3 months later, 6 months later. I don't want to try and do that from memory. So, but I have sympathy for your support costs.
It's both a cost and putting in place and pleasing both internally and externally a lot of people, and it's.
I just think that there's a number of FAQs that the people in Kentucky or wherever they are these days can just. You have a question, boom. Here's an answer. Have a look. If you still have a question, give us a holler back.
With the late, isn't it in the data API that you can renew the certificate? Right, Steve?
It's in the admin API.
So the issue actually is about getting the certificate renewed. So if we can automate that part of it to get back the certificate and the intermediates, we have an automated way through the data API of updating the certificate. So we have one leg of the stool already. It's about how can we automate the other part, and then how can we link it to a diary event so that in fact there's as little manual intervention as possible.
I'll do that. I'll extend my Ansible demonstration in the next FMBug. Just don't invite Doug, because it'll be installing an unsupported SSL certificate, which I assure you works perfectly.
Yeah, no, I know.
And you can totally do it using the the data file script steps to like put that kind of HTTP authentication file in the right place, or maybe you need base elements. I don't know, but. And you spin it there, so it's done, and you can do it all through, like you're saying, Steve. Right there, totally automatic.
Certbot will do it for you, and you just need a cron script that runs every 90 days to import the new one. Yeah, on Linux, of course.
But yeah, no, definitely, because I use. I mean, I've on my machine, I've got a SSL certificate, which I shouldn't say, but I use it. I know that people actually do it. It's just it has to work within the rest of the organization and to get it approved. And
I think that's my frustration, is the fact that I don't want to put anything outside the box in that respect, because the business runs on it. So it's that 50-50. I know it can be done, and I know there's many smart people out there that have done it and posted stuff, and I could just follow I think as Tony said, the one-page PDF, and I'll be off and running, and then I add Steve's half a page automation on it, and then I'm good. So the point is, it's then running not approved software on the server, which is not what I want to do, ideally. But if I have to, because I'm at that tipping point, because I had a 2-year cert that I bought, which is going to expire in September this year, and I'm like, brilliant, Linux server's out. That's the reason why I've been waiting for it. And I was going to move everything over and then change the certs and change everything and just do it all in one go. And now I'm thinking, well, I'll probably have to buy another cert. So for another year. So.
Yeah, and again, just saying what Steve said about next month's presentation and so on. I never heard from anyone at Claris saying don't use Let's Encrypt or something like that. I mean, it's just that they themselves will not support you if that's the configuration that you choose to go with. But it can totally work. That's my understanding.
If that's understanding, that's good. That's all I can say.
I'm not expecting an answer, Doug. Don't worry, mate.
No, but
I hate to interrupt this in full flow, but we've got we're a bit over. I don't know how you're doing, Steve. You're probably good. Doug, are you going to be around for a bit? Are you going to?
I've got to go to 2 meetings, but I'll be back afterwards.
So, Steve, are you good to hold on for about another 5 minutes? Because people seem to have a lot to ask Doug.
Sure. Thanks for the presentation, Doug. Thank you.
Yeah, many thanks for the presentation, Doug. It was great.
Doug, I'm sorry I just arrived in the last 5 minutes. I would love to try to get here for the start, but time zones were,
That's okay. Just do it.
Session's being recorded, Sky, so it'll be.
I look forward to it.
Well, I hope it's being recorded. I've got about 6 machines doing it, so hopefully one of them works. So.
Cool. But for those of you who've been, I don't know if a lot of you have actually been able to buy the new Mac, the Mac M1s.
I'm on it now. I'm using it.
And when is server going to be on M1?
So for the next release, I was saying before, so basically we'll have native support on the M1s. I think server and pro. Both on those.
Cool. Yeah.
And then the other thing is what we're going to try to do, maybe in one of the, whether we do it as a webinar for everyone, we want to do some explanation of how the M1 chip actually does work and how it's basically why it's actually doing this influence on FileMaker, so that people kind of understand in the background what FileMaker kind of does and why having the M1. So we're doing a bit of being nice to Apple, but it's always cool to actually sort of go, oh, look, buy this machine, because now you can actually have a lot more usage.
Well, I mean, I guess with the server, there's so many components, and every one of them has to be M1 optimized, right?
Yeah.
And to be coded for it.
It's the code, yeah.
And so as long as that's all there, hey, we can have server. Great.
So yeah, if you're the lucky ones to actually have yours, I might never get mine. I don't know what it is.
Okay, I think we're going to have to call it a whole there to the questions to Doug. I hope you'll come back again, Doug, maybe next one, and we can bombard you with more questions.
He won't come back.
No, he won't come back. No, you used to be very good and very open. We really appreciate it, Doug, actually. And that's really interesting stuff as well. And thanks for being so open with us.
Cool. Yeah, I'll see you in about an hour.
Okay.
Cheers, Doug. We'll still be here.
Yeah.
Cheers, bye. Steve, are you all fired up and ready to go?
Sure thing, why not? Let's see if this will actually work. Your entire screen. Choose that one. Go.
Steve, I climbed 100 steps to be here for this. Come on, it's going to be good.
Well, it's working. It's working.
It's working. Okay, well, that's a good start. Okay. Well, that's good to know. Okay, so installing FileMaker server on Ubuntu using Ansible. I'm Steve Winter. That's my Twitter handle. Many of you know me. Former school teacher, science educator, FileMaker since before grey hair. Lots of that these days. I do a lot of work with FileMaker integration stuff. Freelance developer. I know most of you because I've been living in Europe for a long time, but these days, I'm now back living here in Christchurch in New Zealand. So yes, I've been up since quite early too, Sky. So yeah, that's who I am. Oh, and some of you know I like going on crazy bike rides, and this is the next one, which was supposed to be this year, but COVID, so next year is the plan through Central America. Installing FileMaker with Ansible. We'll have a quick look at what Ansible is. I'm going to do a demo of this. We'll have a look at the scripts that Ansible uses. We can talk about what else we can do using Ansible, and then there'll be plenty of time for questions and so on at the end as well. What is Ansible? According to the Ansible website, it's simple IT automation. Being a bit more descriptive, Wikipedia says Ansible is an open source software provisioning, configuration management, and application deployment tool enabling infrastructure as code. And it's that last bit that's really important from my perspective. It's the infrastructure as code. It means that there's no more sudoing into a server and apt installing things. There's no more using a user interface to import SSL certificates. Everything about your infrastructure is described in code, and you're basically fully automating that process as far as possible. What is Ansible? It's written in Python, which isn't terribly important, but it does become necessary to know that as we work through the process. You use something called YAML to create things called inventories, roles, templates. YAML literally stands for yet another markup language, which was their tongue-in-cheek way of pointing out that there are already a lot of markup languages, but what the hell, let's make another one. YAML is not specific to Ansible. It's quite widely used in that kind of DevOps kind of environments where you're trying to create configuration. You combine all of those things, the inventories, the roles, the templates, and so on, into things that are called playbooks. And playbooks are used to then perform the deployments that you're doing. And those playbooks perform the tasks in the roles on the generally remote servers that are specified in the inventory. Now, I say generally remote because they don't have to be. They can be as remote as the server next door. They can be as remote as the server in a data center somewhere else. And I put servers there because it's actually possible to use Ansible to update multiple servers with the same playbook simultaneously. Well, not quite simultaneously, but in sequence within the same deployment process. One important thing is that Ansible can only manage servers that it explicitly knows about. And you'll see shortly what I mean by that. But it is very much about managing and controlling servers that you have configured it to. It is completely agentless. Nothing needs to be installed on the servers. All of the control and command is undertaken using SSH. SSH is the common way for communicating across infrastructure level machines. It's idempotent. You'll always get the same results and without side effects. And part of the reason for that is because it's very declarative. You define the desired state of the machine in steps which fulfill that desired state. And so you're very much declaring what needs to happen in what order to ensure that you end up with your server in the state that you want it to be in. So that's enough of that. Let's actually have a look at how that works. Let's put that window over there. In the true tempting demo God's world, I'm actually going to do this all live on actual real infrastructure out in the actual real world. This is my OVH control panel. I'm going to create a new instance in here. For this demonstration, I'm just going to use a sandbox. This is one of their tiny little instances. Costs 0.9 of a cent an hour to run, and it runs FileMaker quite happily. For simplicity for me, I'm going to put this one in the Sydney data center, but you can have a play with it soon too if you like. We want Ubuntu 18.04 because, as we just heard from Doug, that's the one that's supported. SSH works using key pairs for security. And so what I'm doing is I'm saying that I want to use my MS for Multi-Terra Solutions shared key. And that's a key that's installed on all of the servers in our infrastructure. I'm going to call this FMBug.msdev.nz. And that's all I need to do there. And I'm going to just run this hourly because I'm only going to have it around for as long as it takes to do this demonstration. But at less than 1 cent an hour, it's pretty good value. And surprisingly, for a machine that has 1 core, 2 gig of RAM, and 10 gig of storage capacity, it will run FileMaker Server surprisingly well. I will be interested if some of you from over yonder jump on there and have a go with the sample file at what the performance is like. But certainly from here, it's pretty darn good. I'm just going to take the IP address from there. I need to do a couple of things with that. First of all, I'm going to jump over here to public DNS server. And I'm just going to pop this in here so that you lot can get to it as well. So that's just the first step in the process. And that's really the only bits that I need to do manually. I have created the instance and I have created the DNS entry for it. Now, I could use Ansible to do all of that if each of those providers had APIs and then go on from there to call the playbooks that we're going to look at now that are going to build our server for us. I just need to take that IP address and I just need to pop this over here. This is my Ansible inventory file. So I'm just going to put that IP address in there, save that, and then I just need a terminal. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run Ansible playbook I'm going to say I want you to use this file called site.yaml. The inventory that I want you to use is the one that's called OVH, for hopefully obvious reasons. And I want you to limit your actions to just fmbug.msdev.nz, which is the server that I've specified over here. And I hit go, and it tells me that I have failed to update something over here. I didn't. This was me making sure all of this worked flawlessly last night and forgetting to undo what I'd done.
Demo gods.
Yeah. The first thing that it asks me to do is to accept the key connection, because I'm connecting to this brand new server for the first time. And so I've just had to say that I want to continue connecting, and I've said yes. So what's going to happen now, the end result of this is that this window is just going to quietly tick along with a series of responses as it works through the process. And the end result of that is going to be a fully operational FileMaker server without me ever actually touching that server at all. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to slide that window over there. I'm going to make this window a bit smaller so that we can kind of keep an eye on what's going on. So this window here is, okay, see, demo gods. Thanks, Gary.
Apologies.
Let's just put that over there. Okay, let's hope that just keeps going over there. I'm going to have to keep watching it now. So basically, this is our configuration. Site.yaml is the file. It's just not going anywhere. Okay, that's really annoying because that all worked so perfectly last night. We'll just put that there for a minute. I'll explain what it's doing. Basically, we have this configuration file. We make sure that Python's installed. Python, as I said, is what the application is what Ansible's written in. And as we heard Doug say, Python's actually installed by FileMaker server anyway. So we're just preempting that by dropping it on there first. OVH is my inventory file that I mentioned before. And it lists that we have this FileMaker server role, and it goes on these machines. And these machines also live in the OVH inventory. So basically, that's what's happening here. If I take a look in my role, then in here I have this tasks file. And this tasks file is defining all of the things that should be happening. And for some reason, it's this very, very first one that has decided that it doesn't want to play today. But it is that update that we saw Doug talk about, where it does the clean, the update, the upgrade, and it's making sure that all of the server packages are up to date. We install a couple of dependencies that we need for Python to make this whole process run. Create a folder for the installer. Copy our installer across. Now, you'll see here that I'm defining some paths here that have these curly braces in, and they're just variables that we can use. Some of the variables like role path are built in to the Ansible process. So role path is just the path to this folder that I'm in here. And then we're looking in files for another variable, installer name. So in the files folder, you'll see that I've got these deb files. And the deb files are the installation packages for the Ubuntu version of FileMaker server. So they are both sitting in there. This installer file name variable, I'm defining up here in this folder called variables. While I'm here, we'll see that there are a number of variables that are going in here. There's the name of the FileMaker installer. We've got the username and password and the PIN that we want to use for our FileMaker server itself, and then
that file's not right, Steve, is it?
Say again, over.
Oh, sorry, my mistake.
And it's decided it's going to work now. I'm not sure what was going on there before. So this is pointing to one of these. There are two in there in between me getting this set up and going to do this. FileMaker released a new version. You'll see that I've also got my SSL certificate, intermediary certificate, and the SSL key in this file as well. And they're all in here because I'm doing things by the book and installing a real wildcard SSL certificate into the FileMaker server. So this file is defining those variables that are being used here. So basically this one, I'm copying the installer file name into a folder /temp/fms on the remote server. So this source file is a local file. This destination is one on the local server. The next thing that we're doing is we're copying the license file across. So again, it's sitting here in my files folder, copying that over. This next command is using a template command, and it's going to copy and populate the assisted install file. Now, the assisted install file is the way that we shortcut a lot of the questions that get asked by the installer. If I look here in my templates folder, I've got the assisted install file. It's just got all the standard assisted install stuff in it, but you can see that I'm putting in some of my variables that are coming out of this variables file. And so basically, I'm just popping those into here from within this file. Now, one of the key reasons that I'm doing that is because you'll notice that, you may not be able to tell, this OVH file is a light gray color, whereas the all above it is black. And the reason for that is that this OVH file is not being submitted to version control. And it's not being submitted to version control because it's got all these secrets. Oh, wrong one. It's got all these secrets in. It's got usernames, it's got passwords, and it's got SSL keys. So I don't want them in Git. And so they live just in this file, which is local only to this installation. Whereas the assisted install, we want to populate these things at all times. And so this can now go into source control, and these will get replaced in real time by this template command. So this template command says, take this template file, which is what the .j2 on the end means. Take this template file, populate it, and then save it on the server in this location. Okay. Doug talked quite a bit about apt being the package installer for Ubuntu. So we're using apt, and we're running the deb file, the binary file of the installer. And so this is basically saying use the apt command to run this installer, which is the one that we copied a few lines previously. We have to set an environment variable. We have to tell the the installer where we put that assisted install text file. And that's what setting this environment variable does for us. It says, run this installer with this variable configured, which tells the installer to look in /temp/fms for the assisted install text file. Then we install the SSL certificate. We copy the content from the variable into this location. We say it's owned by the root user, and we only give them access to it. We do that with the key, the intermediary certificate. So we've set up the three things that we need to be able to import the certificate. We then use the FMS admin command. This is one of the more challenging parts about working with an installer like the FileMaker server installer, which expects user involvement. Because I don't know if anyone's ever tried using the FMS admin command to import a certificate, but it asks you a bunch of questions as you go along. And so what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to respond to those questions, but we don't want to have to do that manually. And so we can use this expect module, which is built into Ansible. We can say that we expect when we run this command, that we will have to give some responses. And so the first question that the FMS admin certificate import asks is, it says, do you really want to import it? And it gives us a little warning. So this is the question, and the answer that we give is Y for yes. And so that will result in the FMS admin certificate import continuing. You'll notice that I have to muck around putting the slashes in front of brackets and question marks just because they're reserved characters, because this can act as a regular expression.
Steve, mind if I just ask, jump in just quickly?
Yeah.
Doesn't the new admin API give the facility to do those kind of certificate imports and that kind of thing?
Yes, it does. And so, yes, it could be done with the admin API instead. However, it doesn't make a lot of difference. You've got to jump through these hoops somehow, somewhere. And so, yeah, I've chosen to use the FMS admin command. Yeah. I could replace this block here with a call with a curl request to the FM API. The problem with that is that at this point there is no certificate installed and there's no certificate enabled, which means that I would be needing to do that over HTTP, and I would prefer not to be transferring keys and certificates over HTTP. Whereas by using the FMS admin command, this is all happening 100% on the server, because I have already copied the files into place, which is what happened here. That they were done via SSH, which is encrypted and secured. So it's just a more comfortable way of doing it, because it means that it's all happening solely on that server. So this just expects 3 questions from the FMS admin. Really important certificate. What is your username and what is your password? And so because we knew what they were, because we specified what they were going to be when the installer ran, then we can just pass those in at this point. We're then just doing some housekeeping and removing that temporary file that has the installer, the license certificate, and so on. And then this last bit is the question that I was asking Doug. There is a file called .exfac.json which lives in this location, and so long as that file exists and contains a key, which is a UUID, then the FileMaker server admin console will not ask you to import an SSL certificate when it first launches. And so what we're doing in this step is we're simply writing the expected content into that file so that it's there and in place. The final thing that happens is that we do a restart of the server. That applies all the necessary permissions and so on, and it updates the imported certificate into the FileMaker version of Apache. There is still a bug in there, which means the Apache restart command itself won't actually import the certificate properly. So this is very much a hit it with a hammer type solution to that. Basically just restart the whole server. And in that restart process, all of the bits that we need to work actually do what they are supposed to do. And because my talking is very fast, I've been able to get through explaining what was happening slightly faster than it's been able to get through the process. But you can see there that after my initial somewhat unexpected outcome up there, for each of these tasks, the Ansible has responded to tell us what it was doing, and then it's given us back the response that came from that server. So it said OK to that installation, and then for each of these, it's told us that it had made changes on the remote server. The one that really does the work is that one there, which is running the installer. And that was just running the at command. And you can see here that we've got to the end, we've got 17 OKs and 14 changed. So if I jump back over to here and we go to https fmbug.msdev.nz, then we get what we would expect with FileMaker server, add 16,000 admin console, and we get our admin console. Our username and password we defined to be our super secret administrator, and password, and we sign in and we find that everything is up and running. Our database is there and happy. If we take a look here, we can see that we have, not that button, wrong browser. We have the certificate, which is that wildcard certificate that we uploaded and installed as we went along. And so that is what's required to go from nothing to a fully operational FileMaker server without ever actually touching the server itself. Because all of this has been run from my local machine via SSH to a data center in Sydney to work through the process of installing and configuring the server. We'll just hop back over here, and I won't bother doing that. We'll just make it a bit bigger. So what else can we do? Well, the answer is pretty much anything. For one client, what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to move files from one FileMaker server to another FileMaker server. And so what that does is it uses the data API to communicate with each of those servers to see what needs moving. And so Ansible is able to use curl commands to interact with the data server. As Sky was suggesting, it could also interact with the admin API for us if we needed to do that. We can use Ansible to install other applications. One thing I've been asked quite a bit about using Ubuntu is how to deal with backups. And my solution to that is to use Dropbox, because Dropbox does a brilliant job of syncing things for us without us having to do anything. So we can simply install Dropbox using Ansible. We can install a shell script that will compress the backups that are created automatically and then copy them into our Dropbox folder. It's a way of dealing with the relatively modest disk size spaces that tend to come with the smaller instances. We can use it to install shell scripts or plugins. We can copy FileMaker files onto the server. This would be one way. I think it was Chris, you were asking about multi-gigabyte files needing to be moved up. Ansible will happily do that. It uses SCP under the hood if you do a copy command. And so it will happily chug through an 80 gigabyte file and think nothing of it. So this would be a great way that if you were doing a server migration, you could in fact build a complete migration in a single script that basically you just said, this is FileMaker Server 1, this is FileMaker Server 2, I want you to install the latest version on here, close all the files, copy the whole lot across, and you could basically create your new server without even needing to touch it. As you've seen, we can use FMS admin to do stuff, including server configuration, opening files, closing files, moving things around. You can configure multiple servers simultaneously. I use Ansible for a big software as a service client who have web instances where we're updating 45 of them at one time. And so basically to do a deployment onto that solution, I basically click a single button and then walk away. And all 45 of those servers will be updated with the latest version of the application, any database modifications applied, and then the whole process will move on without me having to go to any one of them, let alone all 45 of them. And you could also use it to automate the use of the data migration tool. This is very similar to what Geist are doing with Otto, their Otto product. They're using a different configuration management tool to drive the data migration tool. And that's how Otto is working. And if you felt like it, you could very much roll your own of that as well. And at that point, I will stop talking and let you ask questions.
Really cool, Steve. Sorry to give you the demo goods. Do apologise, mate.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's what I needed.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
really good.
Fascinating, Steve.
Did you say we could hit that and see what its performance is?
I'm already connected.
Yeah.
Some of us already are.
Good. Fine.
FMBug.msdev.nz. I mean, it's there. It's there in the world.
Anyone had any issues with it?
No, it's just really slow.
It's awfully slow.
It's not awfully slow, just not snappy. But it's working.
It's going the other side of the world. So
it is in Sydney, so I wouldn't expect a lot. And it's got 1 CPU and 2 gig of RAM, which is well below the.
And we're all hitting it.
We're all hitting it, yeah.
No, really good, Steve. Really cool.
Steve, how often do you have to? How often do you have to put updates onto Linux?
There are updates, operating system level updates, and supporting application updates. They come out about as regularly as you would expect for any other operating system. But of course, you can use Ansible to deal with that problem for you, because Ansible is able to, in one of these first steps, the ones that was causing the problem for us, this single step here is basically ensuring that all of the installed operating system and applications are up to date. And so basically, I could run just this single step. One of the other things we can do is with Ansible is that we can apply tags. So I'm just going to add a system update tag to this. And so now I can run my playbook and I can say, I just want you to run the tag system update. And now the only thing that it will do is it will run just this task. And so running just that task will ensure that all installed packages on the server are up to date. And so now I can take this task and I can automate that in some way. Now, Ansible doesn't provide a scheduling service, as it were. What I tend to do is that I use a tool called Jenkins, which is an automation tool. In fact, this is quite a good example. If we look, this is doing exactly that. It's a system update that's being run across all of these different servers simultaneously. And so basically it runs a command which is very, very similar to this, and it steps through each of these individual instances and runs effectively this command. Now, I can then take this because this tool allows me to automatically schedule things. Nikolai is suggesting I could use a cron. I absolutely could. I could set up a cron on some sort of an automation server that ran this Ansible command every second day, every night, every week, every month, whatever I wanted to. I prefer to centralize all of that sort of functionality, which is what Jenkins is about. Because I work with a lot of clients across a lot of different instances of stuff, then I've centralized everything in here, and that provides me with the ability to do all of that centralized maintenance stuff. But under the hood, all it's doing is running these Ansible scripts that were originally used to set up the server, just with a particular flag turned on or off.
Steve, I know I asked you this before, but how does it manage the necessity to reboot if you've got a FileMaker server running?
The Ansible has a reboot command built in, and so basically we can run this command. So again, what I could do is I could add a tag to this, which is called reboot, and so now I can run the tag reboot, and that will do a reboot of the server. Ubuntu does a fairly good job of shutting down services, and it will wait a really long time for services to close cleanly when you do a reboot, which I have not tried testing this with large FileMaker databases with many users on Ubuntu because, well, it's not out yet. So I can't hand on my heart say that it will wait long enough, but my expectation is that it will, because it is very much intended for running large, long-running processes anyway. So I don't see why we would have any problems with that.
But you can kick all the users off of the command line, though, can't you?
Absolutely, you can. You can kick all the users off of the command line. You can close all the databases with the command line as well. So in the case where I was wanting to do a maintenance restart of a server, I would schedule it for 3 a.m. in the morning. I would add in 2 steps above here, which used the command FMS admin. So I'd FMS admin disconnect all users, and then I'd
FMS close all databases.
FMS admin close all DB, and then I'd actually do the restart at the bottom. And that would really help to minimize the risk that the reboot would actually terminate services before they were completely closed. Because Ansible will wait until the end of time, if you are happy for it to, for a command to complete. So it will just sit there spinning its wheels until it either gets a success or a failure back from whatever command you ran.
Steve, so what about this right at the beginning? For this YAML file, it's YAML. I don't really know much about it. It's like JSON I'm kind of used to because, we use it all the time now in FileMaker. But is this YAML kind of like procedural? So it just runs top to bottom and just does whatever you tell it?
Exactly. It is entirely procedural. And that's that thing about it being declarative. I wish I'd picked a different word. But because basically it will do these exact steps in this exact order, and it will do it every time. If you run this against multiple servers simultaneously, then it will run this step against every server. And when it has completed doing that, it will run the next step against every server. If one of the servers fails for some reason, then it will stop attempting to run the playbook on that server, but it will continue on the other servers to perform the remainder of the tasks. So Sky, you don't really need to know that the thing you need to know about YAML is that it's horrible.
It's like XML, but so
yeah, like Python, it is very white space dependent. So these 2 spaces here are critical, and if you replace those 2 spaces with a tab, then unless your editor is automatically replacing tabs with spaces, it will screw things up for you. So when you are writing YAML, you do need to be using a good code editor. Don't try and do it in Notepad. It will not go well for you.
BBEdit, I'm sure, will cover that.
Yeah, BBEdit is happy with YAML.
The first demo I ever saw of Ansible was at an AWS event, and the guys at made.com.
Okay.
And their technical director showed how he made a typo, one character in his Ansible script, and shut down their entire website in one step when he thought he was restarting a dev server. He said that everybody's mobile phones just all suddenly all these alarms went off. Just
So that is the other thing that you need to know is that Ansible is insanely powerful. It has complete control of your complete server. And so, yes, the ability to do dumb things is extremely high. However, no greater than you sitting there at the command line of that server. So I would suggest it's safer than sitting there at the command line because you have already thought about exactly what commands you want to run in the order that you want to run them, and you have already run them somewhere else before you do it on a production server. Because at 9 cents a minute, at 0.9 of a cent a minute, you can run up numerous little boxes and test your scripts time and time again until you're certain that they're 100% solid.
Oh,
Steve, the other reason that you don't have to worry too much about writing this YAML is that it's all in GitHub. And so it's there, and you can just come here and you can get my version of the YAML, and you can follow the relatively simple instructions to populate the group vars file and drop in the installer in your certificate and take it away from there. You will need to be part of the ETS right now to get the Ubuntu version of this. In theory, this should run perfectly fine against CentOS as well. You just need to make sure that you have, no, because it's using app, not Yum. So yeah, no, this won't run against CentOS. It could be made to, but there's no value because, as we heard, CentOS is going away.
Steve, since it's so easy to whole installation, is there a way to? Sorry,
I'll have to edit that out of the YouTube video. Thanks.
I just want to try if that YouTube thing works. No, is there a way to test run what you wrote? If it's so easy to make mistakes, can you just test run that, and will it give you back some errors or something, or can you just try and error and wait?
There is no concept of a dry run or anything like that, because it will, in many cases, it will only know if something succeeded if it did, if that makes sense. And so, no, but as I say, I got to this point by building a 1 cent an hour server and running against it and screwing it up numerous times over, and then just going to my cloud console and clicking on the reinstall button to take it back to nothing, and then working through and then making sure it worked, and then rebuilt it and so on, just to ensure that it was doing exactly what I expected it to do. And so now I am confident that I've got the basis of how to install FileMaker server on Ubuntu from nothing in 5 minutes without touching the server.
I think you nailed it, Steve, is the fact that if it's so quick to do that, even if you had a production server and you had a script that was working last month that you deployed, you could copy that, deploy that somewhere else, do your changes, test it on that copy at 1 cent an hour or $1 an hour. It doesn't even matter what it is as far as that's, if that's small. Test it. If it breaks, fine, until you get that code right, and then deploy it live. So you've got a good test environment. It's fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you using a VPS to do that, Steve?
A VPS, a virtual private server?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the OVH website at the moment.
It's public cloud, isn't it?
It's public. It's called public cloud.
Okay, thank you.
And I have lots of stuff on here because they are cost effective and they have data centers in lots of useful places. And
totally, they're really good.
I kind of fell into them before AWS was kind of the FileMaker preferred thing, and it's I just don't really like it. But
I think they probably piggyback on AWS anyway. They're just like a kind of cover over AWS.
Yeah, they're wrapper on top of AWS. So.
Yeah.
Not entirely. Some of their services are. Their Kubernetes offering is, but their public cloud stuff isn't. They've actually got their own data centers.
Yeah, they've got their own data centers.
Because one of them in Strasbourg went up in smoke.
Totally.
So.
Well,
so
Steve, I was going to say, Steve, that's great. Just carry on as long as you want. The virtual bar's open, so.
I've got one question, Steve. On the OVH offering stuff, have you had any issues from a cost point of view when you reach a threshold of disk storage and CPUs and stuff like that? Bearing in mind you've used it a lot, because I know our web team looked at OVH, and because of our site's so big, they didn't. We do on premise and we do it ourselves with our own VMs. But the point is if you're deploying a large FileMaker server, then is OVH still cost effective compared to Amazon and stuff like that?
Once you're talking about disk storage, it depends a little bit, but generally they are about the same cost. Possibly a little bit more expensive, but about the same.
About the same. Fine. Cool.
But for managing all your kind of DNS and all those kind of things, absolutely great. Get your domain names on there, sweet as.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And the other thing is that at present, when I build this server, all I'm doing is running a role called FMS. I can add other roles, and they can be roles that I write myself, or that they can be roles that come from something called the Ansible Galaxy. So there is a guy who goes by the name of Gilling Guy, who writes lots of Ansible roles. And so I would install the Gilling Guy firewall role. And what that would do is that would install a firewall on top of what is installed by FileMaker server. And I would lock down the IP addresses that had access to port 16,000. And I would find out how to do that from Googling the Gilling Guy firewall role and basically finding that in my variables file here, I would specify certain ports that should be opened and certain ports that should be opened only for certain addresses. So I can add in other roles, either that I've written or that come from out of the community. The other one that I would also add in is I would add Gilling Guy certbot, because that would install Let's Encrypt's certbot come on there as well. And in fact, I would do that first. And then I would run my FMS one, and I wouldn't bother with these steps because I would have already generated the certificate on the server. I would simply change this to point to the certificates that came down from the certbot role, which had already run. So basically, I'd run this certbot role, which would generate my SSL certificate in a known location, and then when I ran this role, I would use FMS admin import from the certbot location, not from where I was manually copying things here. Right.
Haven't you guys ever used Zero SSL? Because I've been using them a lot over the last couple of years, and they're brilliant. Like they're kind of a bit like Let's Encrypt, but kind of much more kind of accessible. Very approachable, very easy to use. Your free account, they give you a certain number of free certificates. 90 days, same as Let's Encrypt. And the thing is, if you sign in or register, and you go, hang on a minute, you're not giving me my free certificates anymore. You just email their tech support, and they enable your account to continue getting the free ones. Yeah. And it's very cool. I mean, if you actually pay for it, then they do have the API, so you can do all that kind of generation, renewals, all that kind of thing. Just REST API, easy. So you don't have to install kind of some kind of cert bot onto your server or anything like that.
Okay.
It's worth looking at. Yeah.
Really good, Steve. Great work.
Yeah, really good.
And actually, I should just, sorry, I'll turn this back on because I do have one more slide that's actually vaguely useful for you to screenshot, which has the Ansible website link itself, how Ansible works. That's the playbook that I was using now, that's in GitHub. And then I also wrote a blog post a while back about connecting to FileMaker data API using Ansible. So how we can interact with FileMaker data from Ansible to allow us to make decisions in our Ansible playbooks based on stuff that's stored in FileMaker. So I'm not sure, Joel, have you got somewhere that I can send you that you can put these slides?
Yeah, I have, Steve. Yeah, you can send them to me and I'll put them up on the website, on the FMBug website. There's a section for meetings, and they'll go against each meeting. There's a slide against each meeting, set of slides.
Cool. Okay.
And yes, many thanks, Steve, for the talk.
All right.
Steve, brilliant. Great to hear your voice again.
And the virtual bar, where's that?
It's called Go Get a Drink. This doesn't stop. I stopped any of the recordings and stuff like that. Once that stops, then everyone buggers off, and then the real discussion starts usually. And I can't believe Doug said he's going to come back for that. So he had the tape version earlier. No, it just continues on, and then it's an open door policy about whoever wants to ask any questions or discuss what we've seen. So, and it goes on very, very late usually. So on that note, I want to thank all the people that spoke and presented, and thank you very much. This wouldn't be what it is if it wasn't for you lot.